The woman at my door wore a black wool coat that cost more than my car, her gray eyes holding secrets that could destroy everything I'd built. "Hello, Ethan," she said, and my blood turned to ice. Victoria Lang, the name I'd buried 20 years ago alongside my youth and every foolish dream I'd ever had. She stepped into my small apartment like she owned it, like she'd always owned me. "I've come to collect," she said softly. "Not money, not an apology, something far more dangerous. The truth about the night that ruined us both." Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you on this journey with me. If you stay until the end, you'll discover whether love can survive 2 decades of lies, whether forgiveness is stronger than revenge, and whether a second chance is ever really possible. Hit that like button now, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And let's begin. The snow had started falling at 4 o'clock that Thursday afternoon, and by the time the streetlights flickered on, Ethan Cole's neighborhood looked like it had been wrapped in cotton and forgotten by the world. He stood at his kitchen window, watching fat flakes drift past the cracked glass, accumulating on the fire escape where Mia had hung Christmas lights 3 weeks late, because grief didn't follow calendars, and neither did they. "Dad, the casserole's burning." Ethan turned from the window, grabbing the oven mitt from the counter. "It's not burning, it's browning. It's smoking." Mia looked up from her algebra homework, one eyebrow raised in that expression she'd inherited from her mother, the one that said she loved him but didn't trust him within 10 feet of an oven. At 13, she'd already learned to parent the parent, a skill no child should need, but many did. He pulled the dish out and set it on the stovetop. The edges were definitely burned. "We'll call it Cajun style. We're in Chicago. Cajun Chicago fusion." Mia laughed, and the sound filled their cramped apartment like light. This was their routine, their rhythm, the dance they'd perfected in the 4 years since Sarah's death. Ethan taught sophomore English at Roosevelt High, graded papers until his eyes burned, and came home to this, his daughter, their tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a building that groaned when the wind blew, and a life held together by love and stubbornness in equal measure. The furniture was secondhand, the carpet had stains from previous tenants, the heating was temperamental at best, but it was theirs, and after everything they'd lost, theirs meant something. Ethan was scraping the worst of the blackened cheese into the garbage when the knock came. Not a knock, really. 3 sharp raps that cut through the evening like a judge's gavel. Decisive, expensive, wrong. Mia looked up. "Expecting someone?" "No." Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans, already moving toward the door. Probably a neighbor. Probably Mrs. Chen from 4B asking to borrow something she'd never return. Probably nothing. He opened the door, and 20 years collapsed into a single breath. Victoria Lang stood in the hallway, snowflakes melting in her dark hair, wrapped in a coat that whispered money in every stitch. She looked exactly as he remembered and nothing like her at all. The girl he'd known had worn thrift store jeans and laughed too loud. This woman was honed, polished, dangerous. Her face had sharpened with age, gained angles and armor, but her eyes, those slate-gray eyes, were exactly the same. "Hello, Ethan." His hand tightened on the doorknob. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't think. His mind was racing backward through years he'd spent trying to forget, through summer nights and broken promises, and the kind of pain that doesn't kill you but leaves you fundamentally changed. Victoria. Her name felt strange in his mouth, like a word in a language he'd stopped speaking. "May I come in?" It wasn't really a question. She'd already shifted her weight forward, already made it clear that turning her away wasn't an option. Ethan stepped back and she moved past him into the apartment, bringing cold air and expensive perfume and the weight of every mistake he'd made at 19. Mia had abandoned her homework, eyes wide and curious. She had her mother's instinct for reading rooms, for sensing when the air changed. "Mia, this is..." Ethan's voice caught. "An old friend. Victoria, this is my daughter, Mia." Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Hello, Mia." "Hi." Mia's gaze traveled from Victoria to her father and back again, calculating. "I should probably go to my room." "No, you..." Ethan started, but Mia was already gathering her books. "It's fine. I have a history test tomorrow anyway." She paused at the hallway entrance, looked back at Ethan with a question in her eyes he couldn't answer, then disappeared. The apartment felt smaller with Victoria in it. She belonged in boardrooms and penthouses, places with marble and modern art. Not here, surrounded by IKEA furniture and Mia's sneakers kicked off by the couch and the burned casserole still smoking slightly on the stove. "You've made a nice home," Victoria said, and it didn't sound condescending. It sounded sad. Ethan crossed his arms, defensive. "What are you doing here, Victoria?" "May I sit?" "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "You disappeared 20 years ago. Didn't answer my letters, didn't return my calls, acted like I never existed. So no, you don't get to show up and make yourself comfortable." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I came to tell you the truth." "The truth?" Ethan laughed, and it tasted bitter. "The truth is you chose your father's money over everything we talked about. Over us. That's the truth I've known for 2 decades. That's what he wanted you to believe." Victoria's voice was quiet, controlled, but something fierce moved beneath it. "My father lied to both of us, Ethan, and I can prove it." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Ethan felt his certainty waver, felt the foundation of his anger shift beneath him. "What are you talking about?" Victoria reached into her leather bag and pulled out a bundle of envelopes, yellowed with age, bound with a rubber band. She held them out to him. "These are the letters you wrote me, the ones you thought I never answered." Ethan stared at them. His handwriting, younger and messier, stared back. "I don't understand." "My father intercepted every letter you sent to my college address, kept them. Never told me they existed." Victoria's voice cracked just slightly. "I found them 3 weeks ago in his study. He's dying, Ethan. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and before he dies, he wanted to confess." The floor seemed to tilt. Ethan took the letters with hands that didn't feel like his own. There were dozens of them. He remembered writing each one, remembered pouring his heart onto paper, remembered waiting for responses that never came, remembered the day he finally stopped hoping. "And you?" His voice was hoarse. "Did you write back?" Victoria pulled out another bundle. These envelopes were newer, crisper, but just as numerous. "I sent letters to your apartment, to your parents' house, every week for the first year." She swallowed hard. "He intercepted those too. Made sure you never received them. Made sure we both thought the other had simply moved on." Ethan sank onto the arm of the couch, legs suddenly unreliable. "Why? Why would he do that?" "Because you were a philosophy major from a working-class family, and I was supposed to marry someone from the right background, someone who could help build the company, expand the legacy." Victoria's voice was flat now, reciting facts. "He thought he was protecting me, protecting the family name. He thought love was something you grew out of if you just waited long enough." Jesus Christ. Ethan ran his hand through his hair, mind reeling. 20 years. 20 years of believing she'd betrayed him, of carrying that wound, of building his entire life on the foundation of that abandonment. "He wants to see you," Victoria said, "before he dies. He wants to apologize." No. The refusal was immediate, visceral. "Absolutely not. Ethan, he stole 20 years from us, Victoria. He doesn't get my forgiveness just because he's dying. He doesn't get peace." Victoria stood there, perfect and composed, but her eyes were bright with something that looked like tears. "I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm asking you to hear him, for me, because I need to know that you believe me, that you understand what happened to us wasn't either of our faults." The vulnerability in her voice cut through his anger. This wasn't the cool CEO who'd walked through his door. This was the girl he'd fallen in love with in a college library, the one who'd quoted Byron and worn his jacket and talked about running away to nowhere in particular, just away. "I don't know if I can," Ethan said honestly. "Then do it for closure. Do it so we can finally put this to rest and move on with our lives." She paused. "Or don't. I can't force you, but I needed you to know the truth. You deserve that much." She turned toward the door, and panic flared in Ethan's chest. She was leaving again, disappearing again. Even if it was different this time, even if the leaving was his choice, It felt exactly the same. Wait! The word escaped before he could stop it. Victoria turned back, hope flickering across her face. What happened to you? After? The question felt massive, encompassing 2 decades of unknown life. Did you get married? Kids? No. The word was simple, final. I built a company instead. Lang Industries. I'm the CEO now. Have been for 12 years. She smiled, and it was the saddest thing Ethan had ever seen. Turns out my father was right about one thing. I was very good at business. I just wasn't very good at anything else. And you never loved someone? Victoria finished. I tried, several times. But it turns out when you spend your whole life believing that love is something that disappears without warning, that people leave, that promises mean nothing. She shrugged. You become very difficult to love back. Ethan understood that in his bones. After Victoria, he'd built walls. It had taken Sarah 3 years to break through them. 3 years of patience and stubbornness and refusing to accept his carefully constructed distance. And even then, even after marriage and Mia and a life that felt real, some part of him had always been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sarah's death had felt like confirmation. See, his broken heart had whispered. This is what happens when you let people in. I'm sorry, he said, about all of it. So am I. Victoria pulled her coat tighter around herself. The estate is in Lake Forest. If you change your mind, I'll be there tomorrow, 2 o'clock. She wrote an address on the back of a business card, set it on the small table by the door. But if you don't come, I'll understand. I'll leave you alone. You have my word. She opened the door, and the cold rushed in again. Victoria? She paused. The letters, Ethan said quietly. Can I keep them? They're yours. They always were. Then she was gone, and Ethan was left standing in his small apartment, holding 2 decades worth of words that had never reached their destination, feeling like the ground beneath him had turned to water. He didn't know how long he stood there before Mia's door creaked open. Dad? She approached carefully, like she was approaching a wounded animal. You okay? I don't know. Honesty felt like the only option. He'd never lied to Mia about the big things. He told her about Sarah's death in simple, truthful words. He told her about grief and loss, and how sometimes life hurt more than you thought you could bear. But he'd never told her about Victoria, never told her about the first time his heart had broken, before he knew hearts could do that. Who was she really? Mia sat on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. Ethan sat beside her, still holding the letters. Someone I knew a long time ago, before I met your mom. We were, he struggled for the right word, in love, or we thought we were. We were 19. What happened? I thought she left me, chose her family over us. Apparently I was wrong. He gestured to the letters. Her father intercepted our correspondence, made us both think the other had moved on. Mia's eyes widened. That's messed up. Yeah. Ethan laughed weakly. Yeah, it is. And now he wants to what? Apologize? The disgust in his daughter's voice was palpable. After 20 years? He's dying. Cancer. Mia was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, are you going to go see him? I don't know. Part of me wants to tell him exactly what I think of him. Part of me wants to pretend this never happened. And part of you wants to see her again, Mia said quietly. Victoria. Ethan looked at his daughter, constantly surprised by her perception. Maybe. I don't know what I want. Do you still love her? No. The answer was immediate and honest. I love who she was, or who I remember. But that girl is gone. We're different people now. So why are you thinking about going? It was the question Ethan had been avoiding asking himself. He looked down at the letters in his hands, at the evidence of a love that had existed despite everything working against it. Because I spent 20 years angry, he said finally. Angry at her. Angry at myself for being stupid enough to believe in something that didn't last. And if that anger was based on a lie, he trailed off, uncertain how to finish. Then you wasted a lot of energy being mad at the wrong person, Mia finished. Yeah. His daughter leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a moment they sat in silence, the burned casserole forgotten, the snow still falling outside. "For what it's worth," Mia said, "I think you should go. Not for him, for you, so you can stop carrying this around." "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher." She squeezed his hand. "Plus, I really want to know what happens next. This is like peak drama, Dad. You can't leave me hanging." Despite everything, Ethan smiled. "Your mother would have said the same thing." "Mom was smart." "Yeah, she was." That night, after Mia had gone to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and read the letters. His letters first, the passionate, desperate words of a 19-year-old who thought love could conquer anything. They were embarrassing and earnest and achingly sincere. He'd poured everything into them, every hope, every dream, every promise of a future they'd planned together. Then he read Victoria's letters. They were different, more controlled, more careful. But the love was there, woven through every sentence. She'd written about her classes, about missing him, about her father's pressure to date appropriate men. She'd written about feeling trapped, about counting down days until breaks when she could see him again. And then, about halfway through her bundle, the tone shifted. The letters became shorter, more desperate. She was asking why he hadn't written back, begging him to respond, saying she was sorry for whatever she'd done wrong, asking for another chance. The last letter was dated 9 months after they'd separated for college. It was 2 sentences long. "I guess you've really moved on. I hope you're happy. I hope someone makes you happy. I'm going to try to do the same." Ethan had to set it down, his hands shaking. He'd been halfway across the country, writing his own desperate letters, believing the exact same thing about her. They'd both been abandoned. They'd both been lied to, and neither of them had known. Richard Lang had destroyed them methodically, efficiently, completely, and now he wanted absolution. Ethan looked at the business card Victoria had left, at the address in Lake Forest where old money lived in old houses and made old decisions about other people's lives. He should throw it away. He should let the past stay buried. He had a good life, small but honest, built on real things. Mia was thriving despite everything. He had students who needed him, a routine that worked, a carefully constructed peace. But that peace was built on a lie. And some part of him, the part that had never quite healed, that had carried the wound for 20 years, needed to know what truth felt like. At 1 a.m, Ethan picked up his phone and texted the number on Victoria's business card. "I'll be there tomorrow, 2 p.m. The response came almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Thank you." The next morning, Ethan called in sick to school for the first time in 3 years. Mia had already left for class, leaving a note on the counter. "Good luck. Don't let him off easy. Love you." He spent an hour trying to decide what to wear before realizing it didn't matter. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just a public school teacher going to confront a dying millionaire who'd ruined his life. Jeans and a sweater would do fine. The drive to Lake Forest took 40 minutes through streets that got progressively cleaner, houses that got progressively larger, until Ethan felt like he'd crossed into another world entirely. The Lang estate sat behind iron gates that opened automatically when he pulled up, as if the house had been expecting him. The driveway curved through snow-covered grounds, past frozen fountains and perfect hedges, toward a house that looked like it belonged in a British period drama. It was all stone and windows and old money, the kind of place that made Ethan's little apartment feel like a cardboard box. Victoria was waiting at the front door, dressed more casually today in dark jeans and a cream sweater, but still radiating that aura of controlled power. She looked tired, Ethan thought, worn down by something more than just the drive. "You came," she said, and the relief in her voice was palpable. "I said I would." "People say a lot of things." She stepped back, gesturing him inside. "He's upstairs. The hospice nurse is with him, but I asked her to give us privacy." The interior of the house was exactly what Ethan had imagined. High ceilings, expensive art, the kind of quiet that money buys. Victoria led him through hallways that echoed with their footsteps, past rooms full of furniture that had probably cost more than his car. "I grew up here," Victoria said, as if reading his thoughts. "Hated every minute of it. Too big, too cold, too empty. My mother died when I was 8. And after that, it was just me and him and a house full of people being paid to pretend they cared." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, and meant it. "Don't be. It made me strong, made me successful." She paused at the base of a grand staircase. It also made me incapable of trust, intimacy, or anything resembling a normal relationship. But hey, can't have everything. The bitterness in her voice was new, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe he just hadn't been looking for it 20 years ago, when they were young and stupid and convinced love was enough. They climbed the stairs in silence. At the top, Victoria led him down another hallway to a door that stood slightly ajar. She stopped, her hand on the handle. "He looks different," she warned. "The cancer's been aggressive. He's not the man you remember." "I barely remember him at all," Ethan admitted. "I met him twice. Both times he looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe." Victoria's smile was grim. "That sounds about right." She pushed the door open. "I'll wait outside. Take as long as you need." The room was large but felt small, shrunk down to the size of the hospital bed at its center. Medical equipment beeped and hummed. The air smelled like antiseptic and something else, something sweeter and more final. Death, Ethan thought. Death has a smell. Richard Lang lay under the bed like a collapsed building, all the steel and stone of him reduced to frail bones and loose skin. He'd been a large man, Ethan remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, commanding. Now he looked like he was disappearing, being erased from the world one cell at a time. His eyes were closed, breath rattling in and out with effort. Ethan stood at the foot of the bed, waiting, unsure if he should speak or leave, or Ethan Cole. Richard's eyes opened and even diminished. Even dying, his gaze was sharp. "You came." "Victoria asked me to." "Not for me, then." A wheezing laugh that turned into a cough. "Can't say I blame you." Ethan said nothing. He wasn't here to make this easier. Richard shifted slightly, grimacing with pain. "I suppose you've read the letters." "Yes." "Then you know what I did, what I took from you both." Another rattling breath. "I told myself it was for her own good, that you were a distraction, a phase, something she'd regret when she was older and wiser. I told myself I was being a good father." "You weren't." "No." The word was flat, final. "I was being a controlling bastard who thought money and power gave me the right to decide other people's lives. I was wrong." Ethan felt anger rising in his throat, hot and bitter. "You destroyed us. You made her think I abandoned her, made me think she'd chosen you over everything we talked about building together. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it did to her?" "Yes." Richard's eyes were steady, accepting. "She told me. She's told me every day for 3 weeks since she found those letters. Every cruel thing I did, every lie I told, every year of loneliness I caused. She's been very thorough." "Good." "I don't expect forgiveness, Ethan. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for it." Richard's breathing was more labored now, each word an effort. "I'm just asking you to know the truth. You weren't wrong to love her. She wasn't wrong to love you. The only thing wrong was me, and I'm sorry. That's all. I'm sorry." The apology sat in the air between them, inadequate and enormous at the same time. Ethan wanted to rage, to unleash 20 years of anger and grief, and betrayed trust. But looking at this dying man, this hollow version of the villain he'd built in his mind, all he felt was emptiness. "I met someone," Ethan said quietly. "After Victoria. A woman named Sarah. We got married, had a daughter. She died 4 years ago. Cancer, like you. And every day of our marriage, some small part of me was waiting for her to leave. Waiting for the abandonment I knew was coming, because that's what love meant to me. It meant betrayal. It meant being left behind." Richard closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I almost didn't let myself love her because of what you did. Almost didn't let myself have Mia. Almost missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me because you made me believe love was a weapon people used to hurt each other." Ethan's voice was shaking now. "So no, I don't forgive you, but I'm not going to let what you did define the rest of my life either. That would be giving you too much power, and you've had enough." He turned toward the door. "Ethan." Richard's voice was barely a whisper. "My will. I've left everything jointly to you and Victoria. The estate, the company shares, all of it. You'll have to decide together what to do with it. It's my last attempt at making things right, forcing you to communicate, to work together, to maybe find what I took from you." Ethan stopped, hand on the doorknob. "I don't want your money. It's not about what you want, it's what you're getting. Consider it restitution or revenge. Whatever helps you sleep. Another rattling breath. Just don't let pride make you stupid. That was my mistake. Don't make it yours. Ethan left without another word, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click. Victoria was waiting in the hallway, exactly as she'd promised. How was it? Exactly as terrible as expected. Ethan leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. He told me about the will. Ah, Victoria's expression was carefully neutral. He told me last week. I wanted to warn you, but I thought it might keep you from coming. It might have. Ethan ran his hand through his hair. I don't want his money, Victoria. Neither do I, but we're getting it anyway. She sighed. We can figure that out later. Right now, I need coffee and about 12 hours of sleep. You want to get out of here? The question was simple, casual, but something in her eyes made it feel weighted, a choice being offered, a door being opened. Ethan thought about his small apartment, about Mia waiting to hear what happened, about the safe, small life he'd built from the rubble of his past. He thought about Victoria, this stranger who was also the most familiar person in the world, carrying her own scars and walls and carefully constructed defenses. He thought about the letters, about two young people who'd loved each other despite everything and lost each other anyway, and about the old man dying upstairs who'd orchestrated it all. And he thought, maybe some debts can't be paid, maybe some wounds don't heal, but maybe, just maybe, you can decide not to let them kill you. Yeah, he said finally. Coffee sounds good. They left the house together, driving separately but heading to the same destination, a small coffee shop in town, neutral territory where neither of them had history. Over expensive lattes that tasted like burned water, they started the awkward process of catching up on 20 years. Victoria told him about building Lang Industries from the ground up after getting her MBA, about hostile takeovers and board meetings, and learning to be ruthless because kindness was seen as weakness. She told him about failed relationships with men who wanted her money or her name, but never her. She told him about therapy and antidepressants, and slowly learning that her father's view of the world wasn't the only one. Ethan told her about finding Sarah, about falling in love scared and defensive, about Mia being born and suddenly understanding what it meant to have something worth dying for. He told her about Sarah's diagnosis, the brutal 2 years of treatment that didn't work, the way grief had nearly swallowed him whole. He told her about teaching high school, about finding purpose in shaping young minds, about the strange piece of a small life lived honestly. You seem happy, Victoria said, and it didn't sound like an accusation, just an observation. I'm content, Ethan corrected. There's a difference. Happy is, I don't know, I'm not sure I know what that looks like anymore. Yeah, Victoria stared into her coffee cup. I don't think I ever did. The coffee shop around them filled and emptied, filled and emptied. Time passed. The conversation flowed easier than it should have, finding rhythms and patterns that felt familiar even after 2 decades. They laughed about professors they'd hated, about the terrible apartment Ethan had lived in, about the night they'd snuck into the college pool and almost got arrested. They didn't talk about what came next, about the will, about the estate, about what happened now that the truth was out and the villain was dying upstairs in his big empty house. I should get home, Ethan said finally, checking his phone. Mia gets out of school soon. Right, of course. Victoria stood, gathering her coat. Thank you for coming today, for listening to him, for... She trailed off, searching for words. For not slamming the door in your face last night? That too. She smiled, and for just a moment, Ethan saw the girl he'd known, the one who'd laughed too loud and quoted poetry and believed in impossible things. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you hate me? For any of it? The question caught him off guard. Ethan considered it honestly, looking past his anger and confusion to find the truth underneath. No, he said finally. I don't hate you. I don't even know you well enough anymore to hate you. We're strangers now, Victoria. Strangers who used to know each other really well. She nodded slowly. Is there any world where we could be friends, eventually? I don't know, maybe. Ethan pulled on his jacket. I guess we're about to find out. We've got an estate to deal with together. Lucky us. Yeah, lucky us. They walked out into the cold together, toward separate cars and separate lives, carrying the weight of everything they'd lost and everything they might, possibly, against all odds and better judgment, find again. Ethan drove home through streets that looked the same but felt different, like the world had shifted slightly on its axis. When he pulled up to his building, Mia was already there, sitting on the front steps despite the cold, waiting. Well? She demanded as soon as he was within earshot. Tell me everything. So he did. He told her about the house and the dying man and the apology that didn't change anything but somehow changed everything. He told her about coffee with Victoria, about starting to build something that might become friendship or might become nothing. Do you like her? Mia asked as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. I don't know her, but do you like who she seems to be now? Ethan thought about Victoria across the table, drinking terrible coffee and talking about building empires to fill empty spaces. She's interesting, complicated, broken in ways I recognize. That's not a no, Mia observed. It's not a yes either. It's just, I don't know, sweetheart. It's too soon and too weird and too much. He unlocked their apartment door. Can we table this conversation until I have literally any idea what I'm feeling? Fine, but for the record, I think it's romantic, like a movie. Life isn't a movie. It could be, if you let it. That night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, Ethan thought about doors opening and closing, about paths taken and not taken, about the strange mathematics of loss and chance. He thought about Victoria standing in his doorway, bringing the past crashing into his carefully constructed present. He thought about Richard Lang dying upstairs in his empty mansion, trying to orchestrate redemption from beyond the grave. And he thought about the letters, about two kids who'd loved each other enough to fight for something that had no chance of surviving, and about whether time and loss and hard-earned wisdom could build something stronger than what youth and passion had created. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Thank you again for today. I know it wasn't easy. Sleep well. Ethan stared at the message for a long time before responding. You too. 2 words. Simple, safe, non-committal. But it was something. A thread connecting them across the city, across the years, across all the distance and damage that lay between. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world clean and white and full of possibility. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to not be afraid anymore, to open the door when something unexpected knocked, to believe that second chances were real and not just stories people told themselves to make loss bearable. He fell asleep still wondering, still afraid, still caught between the safety of the life he knew and the terrifying possibility of something else entirely. The debt Victoria had come to collect wasn't about money or apologies or even truth, though it was all those things too. It was about the cost of fear, the price of walls built too high, the interest that accumulates when you spend 20 years believing love is something that hurts you. And now, whether he wanted it or not, whether he was ready or not, it was time to pay. Richard Lang died on a Tuesday morning while Ethan was teaching Macbeth to a classroom of bored sophomores. He didn't find out until lunch when his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria that was characteristically brief. He's gone. Funeral Friday. You don't have to come. Ethan stared at the message, surrounded by the cafeteria chaos of teenagers shouting and laughing and living their loud, messy lives. He felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, not even the grim closure he'd expected. Just a hollow awareness that somewhere across the city, a man who'd shaped his life through absence and manipulation had stopped breathing, and the world kept turning anyway. He texted back, I'll be there. Mia found him that evening sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, a stack of ungraded essays forgotten beside him. You okay? She dropped her backpack by the door, immediately reading his mood the way she always did. Victoria's father died this morning. Oh. Mia pulled out a chair, sat across from him. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Empty? Is that bad? I don't think feelings are bad or good. They just are. She reached across the table, squeezed his hand. Are you going to the funeral? Yeah. Want me to come with you? The offer surprised him. Ethan looked at his daughter, this fierce, perceptive person who'd grown up too fast because life had demanded it, and felt a surge of gratitude so intense it hurt. "You don't have to do that. I know. But maybe you shouldn't go alone. Plus, I'm really curious about this whole situation. It's like watching a TV drama, except it's my actual life." Despite everything, Ethan smiled. "When did you get so grown up?" "About 4 years ago. You were there, remember?" The lightness in her voice didn't quite hide the pain underneath. They both knew exactly when she'd been forced to grow up. The day Sarah died had changed them both in ways that couldn't be undone. "I remember." Ethan squeezed her hand back. "Okay, you can come, but you're wearing something appropriate." "I literally own one dress, Dad, the black one from Mom's funeral." The words hung in the air, sharp and true. Ethan's throat tightened. "Right, that'll work." That night, he pulled out the letters again, reading them by lamplight while the apartment settled into its familiar creaks and sighs. Victoria's words from 20 years ago felt different now, weighted with the knowledge of what came after. She'd written about feeling trapped, about her father's expectations crushing her, about wanting to run away to somewhere new and start over. "Sometimes I think about just getting in a car and driving until I hit an ocean," she'd written in one letter. "Just you and me, and no one telling us who we're supposed to be." Do you ever feel like that? Like the world is too small and too loud, and we're the only two people in it who understand what silence sounds like. He had felt like that. He'd felt exactly like that. And then Richard Lang had made sure they'd never find that silence together. Ethan folded the letters carefully, returned them to their bundle. The anger he'd carried for 20 years had transformed into something more complex. Not forgiveness, but a kind of exhausted acceptance. The man was dead. The damage was done. All that remained was deciding what to do with the wreckage. Friday arrived cold and gray, the kind of February day that felt personal in its bleakness. Ethan and Mia drove to Lake Forest in silence, both dressed in black, both carrying their own grief and curiosity in equal measure. The funeral was being held at some old stone church that probably had a waiting list and required references. The parking lot was full of expensive cars driven by expensive people, all there to mourn a man who'd been powerful enough to warrant their attendance, if not their genuine sorrow. Victoria stood near the entrance, greeting mourners with the practiced grace of someone who'd learned to perform emotion rather than feel it. She wore a black suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly salary, her hair pulled back, her face carefully composed. But when she saw him, something cracked in her expression. Relief, maybe. Or just exhaustion at having to hold it together for people who didn't really matter. "You came," she said, and her voice was rougher than usual. "I said I would." Her eyes shifted to Mia. "And you brought your daughter." "I'm Mia." His daughter extended her hand with the confidence Sarah had taught her. "I figured someone should make sure he doesn't brood in a corner." Victoria's laugh was surprised and genuine. "Thank you for that. He has a tendency toward brooding, doesn't he?" "It's basically his default setting." "I'm right here," Ethan protested, but he was smiling despite himself. Victoria led them inside, through crowds of people who looked important and bored. The church was beautiful, in that cold, impersonal way expensive things often were. Lots of marble and stained glass and flowers that cost enough to feed a family for a week. Richard Lang's casket sat at the front, closed and surrounded by wreaths that screamed money more than mourning. "Most of these people hated him," Victoria said quietly as they found seats near the back. "But they're here because it's expected, because appearances matter more than truth in this world." "Did you hate him?" Mia asked with the blunt honesty of someone too young to have learned proper funeral etiquette. Victoria considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, especially these last few weeks. But also no. He was my father. He was terrible at it, but he tried in his own broken way. I think he actually believed he was protecting me, right up until the end." "That doesn't make it okay," Mia said. "No, it doesn't." Victoria's smile was sad. "But it makes it complicated, which is somehow worse than simple hatred." The service began, and Ethan half listened to a priest who'd probably never met Richard talk about a man who sounded nothing like the cruel manipulator who'd destroyed 2 decades of possibility. People stood and gave eulogies that turned a ruthless businessman into a visionary philanthropist, a controlling father into a devoted family man. It was revisionist history in real time, the way money and power could rewrite even death itself. Victoria didn't speak. She sat rigid and silent, her hands folded in her lap, her face revealing nothing. Only Ethan, sitting beside her, noticed the way her breathing had gone shallow, the slight tremor in her fingers. He reached over, squeezed her hand once, then let go. A small gesture, barely anything, but she glanced at him with something that looked like gratitude. After the service, there was a reception at the Lang estate. More expensive people eating expensive food and pretending they gave a damn. Ethan wanted to leave, to take Mia home to their small apartment where everything was real and honest, but Victoria caught his arm as they were heading toward the door. "Stay," she said. "Please. I can't do this alone." So they stayed, and Ethan found himself moving through rooms full of strangers, holding a glass of wine he didn't want, listening to conversations about markets and investments and things that felt completely disconnected from the fact that a man had died. Mia had found the library and disappeared into it with the single-minded focus she brought to any room with books, which left Ethan and Victoria standing together near the fireplace, watching the performance of grief from the outside. "This is obscene," Victoria said under her breath. "It's what he would have wanted." "That makes it worse." She drained her wine glass, set it down with more force than necessary. All these people pretending to care, pretending he was anything other than what he was. I want to scream at all of them, tell them the truth about him. Why don't you? Because I'm my father's daughter. I know how to perform, how to smile and nod and say the right things while feeling nothing inside. She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You're the only person in this room who knows the truth about what he did, about who he really was. That's not entirely true. You know, I'm his daughter. I'm supposed to defend him, or at least stay silent, but you—" She trailed off, shook her head. "You have every right to stand up right now and tell everyone here exactly what kind of man Richard Lang was, to ruin his carefully constructed legacy. Is that what you want me to do?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "No, because it wouldn't change anything. These people wouldn't care. They'd just decide I was a terrible daughter for allowing it, and he'd still be dead, and we'd still be dealing with the mess he left behind." Before Ethan could respond, a lawyer appeared at Victoria's elbow. Preston Hayes, according to his introduction, senior partner at whatever prestigious firm, had handled the Lang family affairs for generations. He was exactly what Ethan expected: expensive suit, practiced sympathy, the kind of careful grooming that screamed old money. "Miss Lang, Mr. Cole, I'm sorry to intrude at such a difficult time, but we need to schedule a reading of the will. Given the unusual circumstances, the sooner we can address the estate distribution, the better." "Unusual circumstances," Victoria repeated flatly. "Is that what we're calling it? Your father's decision to split the estate was unconventional." Hayes's discomfort was palpable. "I advised against it, but he was quite insistent." "Of course he was." Victoria looked at Ethan. "Can you do Monday, 10 a.m.? I'll have to take another personal day. I'll pay you for your time. That's not necessary." "It is to me." Her voice carried an edge he hadn't heard before. "You're dealing with this mess because of my father's choices. The least I can do is make sure you're not penalized for it." Hayes cleared his throat. "Monday at 10 then. My office downtown, I'll email you both the details." He melted back into the crowd, leaving Ethan and Victoria alone again. "I don't want his money," Ethan said quietly. "I know. You've said that." Victoria turned to face him fully. "But wanting and getting are different things. And maybe there's something we could do with it. Something that would matter more than just refusing it on principle." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but we have time to figure it out." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of condolences and small talk. By the time they escaped, it was nearly dark, and Ethan's head was pounding from the effort of being social in a room full of people who existed in a completely different stratosphere. He found Mia still in the library, curled up in a leather chair reading what looked like a first edition of something expensive. "Ready to go?" he asked. She looked up, marking her place with her finger. "Can I just say that rich people are weird?" "You absolutely can say that." "Like, there's a bathroom in this place that's bigger than our entire apartment. Who needs that much space to pee?" Ethan laughed, and it felt good. Real. "Come on, let's get out of here." Victoria walked them to the door, looking more exhausted than Ethan had ever seen her. Thank you for coming, for staying. It meant more than you know. It's fine, really. It's not fine. None of this is fine. She leaned against the doorframe, and for just a moment the perfect composure cracked completely. I'm so tired, Ethan. I'm tired of performing, tired of pretending I have it all together, tired of being the Ice Queen CEO everyone expects me to be. I just want... She trailed off, and Ethan waited, but she didn't finish the sentence. Just shook her head and straightened up, rebuilding the walls he'd watched crumble. Monday, she said. We'll deal with the legal stuff Monday. Monday, he agreed. The drive home was quiet. Mia fell asleep in the passenger seat, worn out by a day of emotional excess and too many fancy appetizers. Ethan navigated the familiar streets back to their neighborhood, back to buildings that needed paint and streetlights that flickered, back to reality. He carried Mia inside, tucked her into bed still fully dressed because she was 13 and exhausted and he didn't have the heart to wake her. Then he sat in the living room in the dark, thinking about the day, about Victoria standing in that massive house surrounded by people who didn't know her, about the loneliness that came with having everything except what mattered. His phone buzzed. Another text from Victoria. I lied earlier, about not wanting you to expose him. Part of me does want that, wants to burn down his legacy and dance in the ashes. But I'm too much of a coward. Ethan stared at the message, then typed back. Not a coward, just human. There's a difference. Is there? I'm not sure anymore. Yeah, there is. A coward wouldn't have shown up at my door to tell me the truth, wouldn't have faced what your father did. You're a lot of things, Victoria, but you're not a coward. The response took longer this time. Thank you for that, even if I don't believe it. Believing it isn't required. It's still true. No response after that, but Ethan could imagine her in that big house, reading his words, maybe crying, or maybe not, definitely alone. He thought about texting again, saying something comforting, but couldn't find the right words. So he just set the phone down and sat in the dark, feeling the strange weight of being connected to someone again after so long alone. Monday morning arrived with freezing rain that made the city miserable. Ethan dropped Mia at school, then fought traffic downtown to the law offices of Hayes, Brennan, and Associates. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place designed to intimidate. He felt underdressed in his khakis and button-down, surrounded by people in suits that cost more than his rent. Victoria was already there when he arrived, seated in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She looked every inch the CEO today. Sharp navy suit, perfect makeup, hair styled in a way that probably required professional help. But her eyes were tired, and she'd been chewing her bottom lip, a nervous habit he remembered from college. Morning, she said as he entered. Morning. Ethan took the seat across from her, separated by an acre of polished mahogany. Hell of a view. Money buys altitude. She gestured to the city spread below them. Up here you don't have to look at the mess on the ground. Before he could respond, Preston Hayes entered with an assistant carrying a stack of folders that looked ominous. The lawyer settled himself at the head of the table, arranged his papers with precise movements, then folded his hands and looked at them both with practiced solemnity. Thank you both for coming. I know this has been a difficult time, and I'll try to make this as straightforward as possible. He opened the top folder. Richard Lang's will is unusual, as I mentioned. He's divided his estate into several categories, all of which are to be jointly controlled by Victoria Lang and Ethan Cole, with decisions requiring mutual agreement. Ethan felt his stomach drop. What does that mean, exactly? It means neither of you can make decisions about the estate without the other's consent. You must work together on all matters of asset distribution, property management, and charitable giving. That's insane, Victoria said flatly. What if we disagree? Then the assets remain in trust, inaccessible to either party, until you reach consensus. Hayes looked uncomfortable. Your father was very specific about this structure. He wanted to ensure you couldn't simply divide the assets and go your separate ways. Of course he did. Victoria laughed bitterly. Controlling us from beyond the grave. Very on brand. Hayes cleared his throat and began reading. The numbers were staggering. The Lang estate included the house in Lake Forest, a penthouse in downtown Chicago, a vacation home in Aspen, controlling shares in Lang Industries worth hundreds of millions, investment portfolios, art collections, and enough liquid assets to fund a small country. Ethan felt nauseous listening to it all. This wasn't real money. It was abstract, impossible, the kind of wealth that existed in a different reality than the one where he worried about his car breaking down or Mia's college fund. "I can't accept this," he said when Hayes finally paused for breath. "This is insane. I'm a high school teacher. I don't know anything about managing this kind of wealth." "That's why there are trustees and financial advisors," Hayes said smoothly. "You wouldn't be managing it directly, just making decisions about its use. That doesn't make it better." Victoria had been silent through most of the reading, but now she spoke up. "What happens if one of us wants to refuse our portion?" "The entire estate goes into a charitable trust, with neither of you having any control over its distribution. Your father was very clear. It's both of you or neither of you." "One last manipulation," Victoria said softly. "One last way to control my life." "Our lives," Ethan corrected. "He's controlling both of us now." They sat in silence while Hayes continued through the minutiae of tax implications and legal requirements. Ethan stopped listening, his mind spinning. Richard Lang had trapped them in a relationship neither of them asked for, forcing them to communicate, to work together, to rebuild some kind of connection whether they wanted to or not. It was brilliant and cruel in equal measure. Finally, Hayes finished. "You have 30 days to review everything and begin making decisions about the estate. My office is available to help coordinate whatever you need." He stood, clearly eager to be done with this uncomfortable situation. "Again, my condolences on your loss." After he left, Ethan and Victoria sat in the conference room, surrounded by papers detailing their unwanted fortune, neither speaking. The rain continued outside, turning the city gray and blurred. "I need a drink," Victoria said finally. "It's 11 in the morning." "I'm aware of the time." She stood, gathering her coat. "Come on, I know a place." The place turned out to be a dive bar 3 blocks away, the kind of establishment that definitely didn't belong in this neighborhood of expense account lunches and power suits. But Victoria walked in like she owned it, ordered 2 whiskeys neat, and led Ethan to a booth in the back. "I come here when I need to remember what real feels like," she explained, sliding into the worn vinyl seat. "When the boardrooms and penthouses start feeling like a stage set." Ethan took a sip of his whiskey, felt it burn down his throat. "This is completely insane." "Which part? The money? The forced partnership? My father's posthumous manipulation?" "All of it." He set the glass down harder than intended. "I don't want this, Victoria. I don't want the money. I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to be tied to your family's drama for the rest of my life." "I know." "Then help me refuse it. We'll tell Hayes we're both walking away. Let it all go to charity." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, tracing patterns in the condensation on her glass. "What if we didn't?" "What?" "What if we used it for something that mattered, something my father would have hated?" She looked up and there was fire in her eyes. "He wanted to control us, to force us into some kind of reconciliation he thought would redeem him. But what if we took his money and his power and turned it into something good, something that would have made him furious?" "Like what?" "I don't know yet. But think about it, Ethan. How many lives could we change with this kind of money? How many kids like you, smart, talented, but from the wrong side of the tracks? Could we help? How many young people trapped by family expectations or poverty could we give a real choice to?" Ethan felt something shift in his chest. "You're talking about a foundation." "I'm talking about taking all the things my father valued, control, legacy, family name, and using them to destroy everything he believed in. Merit over pedigree. Opportunity over bloodline. Actual choice instead of manipulation disguised as love." "That's revenge disguised as charity?" Victoria smiled grimly. "Maybe, but it would also be real. It would matter, and it would drive him crazy if he knew, which makes it even better." Despite himself, Ethan laughed. The idea was audacious and petty, and kind of brilliant. "You've thought about this." "I've had 3 weeks of watching him die to think about it. 3 weeks of listening to him try to apologize, try to fix things, try to control the narrative one last time." She finished her whiskey in one swallow. "I don't forgive him. I won't. But I can turn his worst impulses into something good. That feels like justice. It also means we'd have to work together." For years, probably. Can you do that? Can you? She countered. Ethan thought about his small apartment, his small life, the safety of routine and lowered expectations. He thought about Mia, about giving her opportunities he'd never had, about breaking the cycle of limitation and loss. And he thought about the letters, about two young people who'd believed in impossible things before the world taught them better. I don't know, he said honestly. But maybe we could try. Victoria extended her hand across the table. Partners? Ethan looked at her hand, at the woman attached to it, successful and broken and angry and hopeful all at once. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the pain and complication and risk. Then he thought about doing nothing, about walking away, about choosing safety over possibility one more time. He took her hand. Partners. They shook, and something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, not even friendship, really. Just a shared understanding that they'd both been shaped by loss, and were choosing, against all logic, to build something from it. We're going to need rules, Ethan said, releasing her hand. Boundaries. This is a business partnership, nothing more. Agreed. Strictly professional. We meet once a week to discuss the foundation. Plan strategy, review applications, whatever needs doing. Once a week, Victoria echoed. My office or neutral territory? Neutral. Your office would make me feel like I'm 12 years old getting called to the principal. She smiled. Fair enough. Anything else? We don't talk about us. That's ancient history, and dragging it up will just make this complicated. Victoria's smile faded. Ancient history. Right. Of course. Something in her tone made Ethan's chest tighten, but he pushed past it. This is about the foundation, about doing something good with something terrible. That's it. That's it, she agreed, but her voice was quieter now, more distant. They finished their drinks in silence that felt heavier than it should have. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gray. They walked back to the parking garage together, not quite comfortable, but not enemies either. Something in between, something undefined. I'll have my assistant set up a meeting for next week, Victoria said as they reached her car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary. We can start outlining what we want this foundation to look like. Sounds good. She hesitated, hand on the car door. Ethan, thank you for not walking away, for being willing to try this. Don't thank me yet. We might hate each other in a month. We might. She slid into the driver's seat, but at least it'll be for new reasons instead of old ones. Ethan watched her drive away, then walked to his own car, a 12-year-old Honda with a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. The contrast wasn't lost on him. They were from different worlds, always had been. Money didn't change that. A forced partnership didn't change that. But as he drove home through streets that felt familiar and strange all at once, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a decision that would change everything. For better or worse, he'd opened a door he'd kept firmly closed for 20 years. And there was no going back now. The first foundation meeting happened in a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, halfway between Ethan's world and Victoria's. She arrived 10 minutes early, laptop open, already typing furiously when he walked in with folders under his arm and coffee stains on his sleeve from the chaos of morning drop-off with Mia. You're late, Victoria said without looking up. I'm 3 minutes early. I've been here for 13 minutes. That makes you late by my standards. She glanced up and her expression softened slightly. Sorry, force of habit. In my world, early is on time and on time is late. In my world, on time is a minor miracle. Ethan dropped into the chair across from her. Mia couldn't find her chemistry homework, the cat knocked over a full mug of coffee, and there was an accident on Lakeshore Drive. So 3 minutes early feels like a win. You have a cat? We have a cat. His name is Chaos, which is accurate. Victoria's smile was brief but genuine. I like that you named him appropriately. They spent the first hour dancing around each other verbally, testing boundaries, figuring out how to work together without acknowledging the weight of everything unspoken between them. Victoria had prepared a presentation on foundation structures, tax implications, and grant-making strategies. Ethan had brought a list of organizations he admired, programs that had helped kids like him, ideas scribbled on notebook paper because he didn't own presentation software. We're approaching this completely differently, Victoria observed, looking at his handwritten notes. Is that a problem? No, actually, I think it's good. I know the mechanics, the business side. You know the human side, what actually matters. She tapped her pen against her laptop. We need both. So what do we do first? Victoria pulled up a document on her screen, turned it so he could see. First, we name it. Everything starts with identity. They spent 2 hours debating names, rejecting anything that sounded too corporate, too sentimental, too much like Richard Lang trying to buy redemption. Finally, Ethan suggested simply, the Second Chance Foundation. Victoria stared at him. That's actually perfect. Yeah? It's what we're both getting, right? A second chance to build something that matters. A second chance to make different choices than the ones made for us. She typed it into her document. The Second Chance Foundation, for students whose potential has been limited by circumstances beyond their control. Over the next 3 weeks, they met 4 more times, each meeting lasting longer than the last as the foundation took shape. They argued about selection criteria, about whether to focus on college scholarships or vocational training, or both. Victoria wanted measurable outcomes and accountability. Ethan wanted to trust the kids, to give them freedom to fail and try again. They compromised, like partners learning a new dance, stepping on each other's toes but finding a rhythm. The 5th meeting happened at Ethan's apartment because Mia had insisted on being involved. If you're making decisions about my future college fund replacement, I should get a say, she'd argued, and Ethan couldn't really dispute the logic. Victoria arrived at 6, looking uncomfortable in the cramped hallway, carrying expensive wine and cheaper anxiety. I wasn't sure what to bring. Your brain, Mia said, opening the door wider. And maybe some of that fancy wine. Dad only buys the stuff with screw caps. Mia. Ethan shot his daughter a look, but she just grinned. What? It's true. Victoria stepped inside, and Ethan watched her take in their home with fresh eyes. The mismatched furniture, the textbooks piled on every surface, the photos of Sarah still on the walls because taking them down felt like erasure. This wasn't the carefully curated space of someone with money. This was life, messy and real and unapologetically small. I like it, Victoria said quietly. It feels alive. They ate pizza from the box and spread foundation documents across the coffee table while Mia asked pointed questions about application processes and selection bias. She was sharp, Ethan thought with pride. Sharper than he'd been at 13, asking the kinds of questions that made Victoria pause and reconsider her assumptions. What about kids who don't have perfect grades? Mia asked. Like, what if someone's really smart but they had to work to help their family, so their GPA isn't amazing? We'd consider extenuating circumstances, Victoria started, but Mia cut her off. That's corporate speak for probably not. You need to actually build it into the criteria. Make it clear that you're looking for potential, not just performance. Victoria looked at Ethan. Your daughter is terrifying. I know. I'm very proud. Can I see the application draft? Mia held out her hand, and Victoria handed over her laptop without argument. The teenager scrolled through, making small noises of disapproval. This is too formal. You're going to scare off exactly the kids you want to help. What would you suggest? Let me rewrite it. I'll show you tomorrow. Mia handed the laptop back. Also, you should have video applications as an option. Not everyone is good at writing, but that doesn't mean they don't have something to say. After Mia retreated to her room to finish homework, Ethan and Victoria sat in the living room's comfortable silence, drinking the expensive wine she'd brought. Your daughter is remarkable, Victoria said. She is. She's also right. About the applications. I know. Victoria swirled her wine, watching the light catch in it. I've spent so long in a world where everything is polished and perfect that I forgot how to see past the surface. Mia sees straight to what matters. She learned that from her mother. Ethan's voice caught slightly. Sarah was like that. She could look at someone and just know them. See past all the defenses to who they really were. She sounds incredible. She was. He took a long drink. I miss her every day, but it's different now. Less sharp. More like an ache that's part of me instead of something trying to kill me. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Can I ask what happened? You don't have to tell me. Ethan found himself wanting to tell her, which surprised him. ovarian cancer. By the time they found it, it had already spread. She fought for 2 years, but he shrugged, the gesture encompassing everything that couldn't be said. The last 6 months were bad, really bad. Mia was 9, old enough to understand what was happening, but too young to process it. I watched my wife die slowly, and I watched my daughter lose her childhood, and I couldn't stop either thing. I'm so sorry. Me too. Ethan set his glass down. The worst part was feeling like I was failing both of them. Sarah needed me to be strong, to not fall apart. Mia needed me to be honest, to help her grieve. I didn't know how to be both things at once. But you did it anyway. I survived it. I'm not sure that's the same as doing it well. Victoria shifted on the couch, and in the lamplight she looked younger, more like the girl he'd known. You're raising an exceptional kid, Ethan. That doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't happen when you fail. She raised herself mostly. I just tried not to screw it up too badly. I don't believe that. Victoria's voice was firm. I've seen enough broken families, enough kids damaged by parents who checked out emotionally. Mia is confident, kind, brilliant. That came from somewhere. That came from you. The compliment made Ethan uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite name. Thank you. They sat in silence for a while, the city humming outside the windows, the apartment settling around them. It felt domestic, Ethan thought, comfortable, like they'd done this 100 times instead of once. Can I ask you something? Victoria's voice was careful. About Sarah, did you tell her? About us? Yeah, early on when we first started dating, Ethan leaned back against the couch. She asked why I was so guarded, why I kept expecting her to leave. So I told her about you. About us. About believing you'd abandoned me. What did she say? She said that whoever you were an idiot for letting me go. He smiled at the memory. Then she spent 3 years proving that not everyone leaves, that love could be steady instead of dramatic, that boring and reliable could be their own kind of romance. She was right. About which part? All of it. Victoria's eyes were bright. I was an idiot. And she sounds like she was exactly what you needed. She was. Ethan felt the familiar ache in his chest. And now she's gone, and I'm back to not trusting that anything good will last. Is that what this is about? The rules, the boundaries, keeping everything professional? Victoria's voice was soft. You're protecting yourself. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just being smart. We tried this once, Victoria. It didn't work. We didn't try anything. We were kept apart by someone else's choices. And now we're being pushed together by those same choices. Your father is still controlling us, even dead. Doesn't that bother you? Every single day. Victoria set her wine glass down with deliberate care. But I'm choosing to see it differently. He's given us resources and forced proximity. What we do with that is up to us. We can build the foundation and stay strangers, or we can build the foundation and maybe, possibly, become friends. That's our choice, not his. Friends, Ethan repeated, testing the word. Is that so impossible? He looked at her, really looked at her. The expensive clothes and perfect hair couldn't quite hide the loneliness underneath, the same kind he carried. They were both survivors of different kinds of loss, both trying to build meaning from wreckage. No, he said finally. It's not impossible, just scary. Most worthwhile things are. After Victoria left, Ethan stood at the window watching her car disappear into traffic. Mia emerged from her room, supposedly doing homework but obviously eavesdropping. You like her, she said. We're working together. That's not what I said. Mia came to stand beside him. You like her, as a person, maybe more. It's complicated. Everything's complicated, Dad. That's not an excuse. She bumped his shoulder with hers. Mom would want you to be happy. You know that, right? I am happy. You're content. There's a difference, remember? You said so yourself. Mia's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying you should marry her or anything weird. I'm just saying maybe it's okay to let someone in again, to have an actual friend who's not your teenage daughter. When did you get so wise? You ask me that a lot. Maybe you should start believing the answer. She kissed his cheek. I'm going to finish my homework. Think about what I said. The foundation work intensified over the next month. They hired a small staff, rented office space in a building that wasn't too fancy but wasn't falling apart either. They interviewed potential board members, reviewed legal documents until Ethan's eyes crossed, and slowly, painstakingly, built something real from Richard Lang's guilty fortune. And somewhere in the process, the boundaries Ethan had insisted on began to blur. It started small. Victoria texted him a funny article about educational reform at 10 at night, and he responded, and suddenly they were having a conversation about philosophy and pedagogy that lasted until 2 in the morning. She started asking his opinion on things unrelated to the foundation, and he started offering it. They grabbed lunch after meetings, then dinner. She came to Mia's school play and sat next to him in the auditorium, laughing at all the right moments. This is a slippery slope, Ethan told himself, but he kept sliding anyway. 6 weeks into their partnership, Victoria showed up at his apartment unannounced on a Saturday morning, looking nothing like the polished CEO he'd grown accustomed to. She wore jeans and an old sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked young and uncertain and heartbreakingly real. "I need help," she said when he opened the door. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. She held up a bag from the hardware store. "I bought paint for my apartment. I want to change something, make it feel less like a hotel room and more like a home. But I don't know how to paint a wall." Ethan stared at her. "You're a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and you don't know how to paint? I know how to acquire companies and negotiate hostile takeovers. I don't know how to paint." She looked almost embarrassed. "Will you help me? Please." He should have said no, should have maintained the boundaries, kept things professional, protected himself from the inevitable complication. Instead, he heard himself say, "Yeah, okay, let me grab my keys." Victoria's penthouse was everything Ethan expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the lake, modern furniture that looked uncomfortable, art on the walls that probably cost 6 figures. It was beautiful and cold and completely impersonal, like a very expensive hotel room. "I hate it," Victoria said, following his gaze. "I've lived here for 8 years and I hate every inch of it, but I didn't know how to make it different." "So you're starting with paint?" "I'm starting with something, anything." She pulled out rollers and brushes with the enthusiasm of someone who'd watched too many home improvement shows. "I want to paint the bedroom, make it warm, less white, more alive." They spent the afternoon covering furniture with drop cloths, taping edges, arguing about whether the color she'd chosen was sage or seafoam. Ethan showed her how to load the roller properly, how to work in sections, how to fix the inevitable drips and mistakes. She was terrible at it, getting more paint on herself than the wall, but she laughed in a way he'd never heard before. Free and unself-conscious, and completely unlike the controlled woman she usually presented to the world. "This is the most fun I've had in years," she admitted, sitting cross-legged on the drop cloth, paint in her hair. "Painting a wall?" "Doing something with my hands, creating something, not just managing or directing or delegating." She gestured at the half-painted wall. "It's imperfect and messy and completely mine." Ethan sat beside her, his own hands covered in sage or seafoam. "You need more of this in your life." "I know, I just don't know how to have it. I've spent so long being Victoria Lang, CEO, that I forgot how to be anything else. So learn again, it's not too late." "Isn't it? I'm 40. I've wasted half my life building an empire I don't even like, trying to prove something to a dead man who'll never be impressed." "Then stop. Walk away." Victoria laughed bitterly. "And do what? This is all I know, all I'm good at." "That's not true. You're good at the foundation work. You're good at seeing solutions. You're good at this." He gestured at the painted wall. "You just haven't given yourself permission to try." She turned to look at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes was almost painful. "I'm scared, Ethan. I'm scared of wanting something different and failing, scared of trying to build a real life and discovering I don't know how." "Everyone's scared of that." "You're not." "Are you kidding? I'm terrified constantly. Terrified I'm screwing up Mia. Terrified I'm one mistake away from losing everything. Terrified that opening myself up to anything new will end the same way everything else has. With loss." He met her gaze. "Being scared doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing something that matters." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, barely anything, but it cracked something open in Ethan's chest. He put his arm around her, and they sat there on the floor of her too-perfect apartment, surrounded by paint cans and drop cloths, holding each other like survivors of the same shipwreck. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing up. For helping me paint. For not giving up on me, even when I'm impossible." "You're not impossible. You're just learning." He squeezed her shoulder. "We both are." They finished the wall as afternoon faded into evening, ordered Chinese food because neither of them wanted to cook, and ate it sitting on her balcony overlooking the city. Somewhere between the spring rolls and the lo mein, the conversation shifted from safe topics to dangerous ones. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria set down her chopsticks. "That night I showed up at your apartment, you could have slammed the door in my face. Why didn't you?" "I don't know. Curiosity? Shock? Some stupid part of me that never stopped wondering what if?" "Do you still wonder that?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ethan knew he should deflect, should rebuild the boundaries, should protect himself. Instead, he told the truth. "Yeah. Sometimes. More lately." "Me too." Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. "More than sometimes. More than I should." "Victoria, I know. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea. We're business partners. We have history. We're both damaged in ways that would make any relationship complicated. I know." She looked at him, and her eyes were fierce. "But I'm tired of living my life based on what I should do instead of what I want. Aren't you? What I want isn't always what's good for me." "What do you want, Ethan?" Her voice was challenging now. "Right now, in this moment, what do you actually want?" He should have lied, should have said something safe and distant and professional. But sitting there on her balcony with the city spread below them and paint still drying on the walls, Ethan found he was tired of lying to himself. "I want to stop being scared," he said quietly. "I want to believe that loving someone doesn't automatically mean losing them. I want—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "What?" "I want to see if we could be something other than what we were. Not those kids who thought love was easy, but these people we've become. Broken and careful and maybe better for it." Victoria's breath caught. "That's what I want too." They sat in silence for a moment, the admission hanging between them like a live wire. Then Victoria stood, held out her hand. "Stay," she said. Not like that, just stay. Sleep on the couch or in the guest room or wherever. I just don't want to be alone tonight." Ethan looked at her hand, at the offer being made. Every rational part of him screamed that this was a mistake, that getting closer would only lead to pain, that he should go home to his safe, small apartment and forget this conversation ever happened. Instead, he took her hand. "Okay." They didn't talk about what it meant, this choice to stay, this crossing of some invisible line. Victoria gave him a spare toothbrush and a t-shirt that was probably designer but felt like cotton, and he settled into her guest room, which was bigger than his bedroom at home, feeling like he'd stepped off a cliff without checking for the ground. He didn't sleep much. Around 2 in the morning, he heard Victoria moving around in the apartment, restless. He found her in the kitchen, making tea by the light of the microwave. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She jumped slightly. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I was already awake." He leaned against the counter. "Want to talk about it?" "About what?" "Whatever's keeping you up." Victoria poured hot water over her tea bag, watching it steep like it held answers. "I keep thinking about my father, about how he died alone in that big house, surrounded by things instead of people. And I think about my apartment, my beautiful, expensive, empty apartment, and I wonder if I'm heading down the same path." "You're not him, Victoria." "How do you know? I've spent 20 years building exactly the life he wanted for me. Success, wealth, power. The only thing missing is a socially acceptable marriage to someone equally wealthy and emotionally unavailable. But you're here, painting walls, eating Chinese food, trying to change things. That's different. Is it? Or am I just playing at being different while staying exactly the same?" She took a sip of tea, winced at the heat. "I don't want to die alone, Ethan. I don't want to reach the end of my life and realize I spent it building empires instead of connections." "Then don't. It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" Ethan moved closer. "You decide what matters. You make different choices. You let people in, even when it's terrifying." Is that what you're doing? Letting me in? He thought about lying, about protecting himself one more time. Then he thought about Sarah's voice in his head, telling him to stop hiding, to stop letting fear make his decisions. I'm trying to, he said honestly. It's harder than I thought it would be. Victoria set down her tea, turned to face him fully. What are we doing, Ethan? Really? I don't know. Building a foundation, building a friendship, maybe building something else if we're brave enough. I'm not brave. Neither am I. But maybe we could be brave together. Maybe that's enough. She stepped closer, and Ethan's heart started racing in a way that felt both terrifying and right. I'm going to kiss you now, Victoria said. If you don't want me to, you should say something. He didn't say anything. The kiss was nothing like the ones they'd shared 20 years ago. Those had been desperate and dramatic, fueled by youth and the certainty that love could conquer anything. This was slower, more careful, weighted with the knowledge of everything that could go wrong. But underneath the caution was something real and solid, built on who they actually were instead of who they'd pretended to be. When they pulled apart, Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That was either the best decision or the worst decision I've ever made. We'll find out which. Are you staying? Really staying, I mean? Ethan thought about his apartment, about Mia sleeping safe in her room, about all the reasons this was moving too fast. Then he thought about the paint-splattered woman in front of him, asking to not be alone, and he made a choice that felt both reckless and inevitable. Yeah, he said. I'm staying. They didn't sleep together that night, both of them too cautious, too aware of the fragility of what they were building. Instead, they sat on her couch, watching the city lights until dawn, talking about everything and nothing, slowly learning how to trust each other again. When the sun rose over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The walls he'd built so carefully over 20 years didn't crumble all at once, but maybe they'd developed a crack. Maybe that was enough for now. I should go home, he said as morning light filled the apartment. Mia will wonder where I am. Will she be upset? Probably the opposite. She's been trying to set us up since day one. He stood, stretching muscles stiff from a night on the couch. But I need to talk to her, make sure she's okay with this, whatever this is. That's very thoughtful. That's being a parent. He looked at Victoria, rumpled and paint-stained and more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. Can I see you later? Maybe dinner? I'd like that. The drive home felt surreal, like he'd crossed into an alternate timeline where things he'd stopped hoping for became possible. The city was waking up around him. Joggers on the lakefront path, coffee shops opening their doors, normal people living normal lives. Ethan wondered if he looked different, if the choice he'd made in the early morning hours showed on his face. Mia was eating cereal at the kitchen table when he walked in, still in yesterday's clothes. She took one look at him and grinned. Dad, did you sleep at Victoria's? How did you... You're wearing fancy designer clothes and you smell like expensive apartment. Also, you're terrible at lying. She pointed her spoon at him. Sit. Tell me everything. So he did. He told her about painting walls and eating Chinese food and staying up all night talking. He told her about being scared and choosing to try anyway. He didn't tell her about the kiss. Some things were still private. But Mia was smart enough to read between the lines. So you're dating her? Mia asked when he finished. I don't know what we're doing. We're figuring it out. But you like her, really like her. Yeah, I really like her. Mia was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked the question he'd been dreading. What about Mom? Ethan sat down across from his daughter, choosing his words carefully. I will always love your mother. She gave me you, gave me the best years of my life, taught me how to be a better person. That doesn't change just because she's gone. But she's gone, Mia, and I'm still here, and maybe it's okay to want something for myself again, to let someone in who isn't just you. Do you think Mom would like her, Victoria? The question caught him off guard. Ethan thought about it honestly, imagining Sarah meeting Victoria, two strong women circling each other like planets. I think they would have driven each other crazy. Sarah was all warmth and spontaneity. Victoria's all control and planning. But yeah, I think Mom would have liked her. Eventually. She would have seen past all Victoria's armor to the person underneath. The person you see? Yeah, the person I'm starting to see. Mia pushed her cereal bowl aside, came around the table to hug him. Then I'm happy for you, Dad. You deserve to be happy. Like, actually happy, not just content. When did you get so wise? He asked, and she laughed. You really need to stop asking that question and start believing the answer. That evening, Ethan took Victoria to a small Italian restaurant in his neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just good food and dim lighting and red checkered tablecloths. She looked out of place in her expensive dress, but she didn't seem to care. Mia knows, Ethan said over wine that came in a carafe. About us, whatever we are. How did she take it? Better than I expected. She gave us her blessing, which feels weird to say about my 13-year-old daughter, but there it is. Victoria smiled. She's protective of you. We're protective of each other. It's been just us for a long time. And now it might not be just you anymore. That's got to be scary for her. It's scary for all of us. Ethan set down his wine glass. Victoria, I need you to understand something. Mia comes first, always. If this, whatever this is between us, becomes something that hurts her, or confuses her, or makes her life harder, I'll choose her. Every time. I would expect nothing less, and I would think less of you if you didn't. Victoria reached across the table, took his hand. I'm not asking you to choose between us, Ethan. I'm asking for a chance to be part of your life. Both of your lives, if she'll let me. She's a tough audience. Good. I'd be disappointed if she wasn't. Victoria squeezed his hand. I don't want to replace her mother. I couldn't if I tried. I just want to be someone who cares about both of you, someone who shows up and stays. Can you do that? Show up and stay? Because I've had enough people leave. So has Mia. If you're not sure, I'm not sure about anything, Victoria interrupted. I'm terrified, actually. But I'm here anyway. That has to count for something. It did count for something. It counted for everything. They finished dinner talking about the foundation, about the first round of applications they'd received, about the scholarship recipients they'd choose. Safe topics, easy topics, dancing around the bigger questions neither of them was ready to answer. But underneath the safe conversation was a current of something deeper, something that felt both fragile and strong. When Ethan drove her home that night, Victoria invited him up. Not for anything dramatic or reckless, just for coffee and more conversation. They sat on her balcony again, wrapped in blankets against the spring cold, and talked until the city quieted around them. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Victoria admitted, for you to realize this is a mistake and walk away. Or for me to sabotage it because that's what I do. What if neither of those things happens? Then I guess we figure out what comes next. Together, Ethan said. Not a question. A statement. Together, Victoria agreed. And sitting there in the early morning hours, wrapped in expensive blankets on a balcony overlooking a city that had witnessed all their mistakes and failures, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind, but something quieter and more durable. The kind that whispered maybe, just maybe, second chances were real. Spring melted into summer with a gentleness that felt almost suspicious, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what Ethan and Victoria would do with their fragile second chance. The foundation work consumed their days, reviewing applications, interviewing candidates, making decisions that would change young lives. But the evenings belonged to something else entirely, something neither of them had quite figured out how to name. Victoria started spending more time at Ethan's apartment, showing up with groceries and cooking elaborate meals that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. She burned pasta, oversalted chicken, and once set off the smoke detector making what was supposed to be a simple stir-fry. But she laughed at her failures in a way the old Victoria never would have. And Ethan found himself falling for this version of her. Imperfect, trying, beautifully human. I think you're doing this on purpose, Mia said one evening, watching Victoria scrape a charred casserole into the trash. Like, nobody's actually this bad at cooking. I assure you, this is genuine incompetence. Victoria surveyed the disaster in the pan. I've had personal chefs my entire adult life. Turns out that's a terrible way to learn basic life skills. We could just order pizza, Ethan suggested, trying not to smile. Absolutely not. I will conquer this recipe if it kills me. Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling through the instructions again. I just don't understand. I followed every step exactly. Except the part where you were supposed to use the oven, not the broiler, Mia pointed out. Those are different things? Ethan couldn't hold back his laughter anymore. Yes, Victoria. Those are very different things. She threw a dish towel at him, but she was smiling. Fine, pizza. But next time I'm taking a cooking class. Next time, Ethan repeated, and the words felt heavy with promise. Next time meant there would be a future. Meant this wasn't just a temporary arrangement that would dissolve when reality set in. They ordered pizza and ate it on the living room floor because Mia had claimed the table for a science project that involved an alarming number of petri dishes. Victoria sat cross-legged in designer jeans that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly car payment, looking completely at home in his cramped apartment in a way that still surprised him. I have a board meeting Thursday, she said between bites. Lang Industries. They want to discuss the company's future direction. How do you feel about that? Ethan asked, reading the tension in her shoulders. Honestly, I'm thinking about stepping down as CEO. Mia looked up from her pizza, suddenly interested. Seriously? I've been thinking about it for a while now. The foundation work is more fulfilling than anything I've done at the company in years. And I keep asking myself what I'm actually building there, what legacy I'm creating. Victoria shrugged. Turns out making rich people richer doesn't give my life meaning. Who knew? What would you do instead? Ethan asked carefully, knowing this was a big decision, potentially a dangerous one. Focus on the foundation full time. Maybe go back to school, get a degree in education or social work. Something that actually matters. She met his eyes. Is that crazy? Walking away from everything I've built? It's brave, Mia said before Ethan could respond. And honestly, way cooler than being a CEO. Everyone wants to be a CEO. How many people actually walk away from power to do something that helps people? Victoria's smile was grateful and a little watery. You're good for my ego, kid. I know. Dad got lucky when he had me. The luckiest, Ethan agreed, ruffling his daughter's hair. Later that night, after Mia had gone to bed and Victoria was getting ready to leave, Ethan walked her to the door. She lingered in the doorway, neither leaving nor staying, caught in that in-between space they'd been occupying for months. Stay, Ethan said quietly. Not in the guest room this time. With me. Victoria's breath caught. Are you sure? No, but I'm tired of only doing things I'm sure about. Those decisions haven't exactly led to a thrilling life. What about Mia? She's 13, not stupid. She knows we're together. She knows you're here half the time anyway. He took Victoria's hand. I'm not asking for anything permanent or dramatic. I'm just asking you to stop leaving at midnight like you're Cinderella and my apartment is going to turn into a pumpkin. Victoria laughed, and it sounded like relief. Okay, yeah, I'll stay. They moved through the evening routine with a careful intimacy that felt both new and familiar. Victoria borrowed one of his shirts, and Ethan tried not to think about how right she looked in his space, in his clothes, in his life. They lay in bed talking until sleep claimed them both, and when Ethan woke up with her beside him in the early morning light, he felt something shift in his chest. Not the desperate, consuming love of his youth, but something steadier, something that might actually last. The Foundation's first scholarship ceremony happened on a humid July evening at a hotel ballroom that Victoria had insisted on renting despite Ethan's protests about excess. But watching 20 teenagers walk across the stage to accept scholarships that would change their lives, Ethan had to admit she'd been right. This moment deserved ceremony, deserved recognition, deserved to feel important. He stood backstage with Victoria, watching the recipients give their speeches, stories of poverty and perseverance, of parents who worked 3 jobs, of foster care and homelessness, and the kind of obstacles that would have broken lesser people. Each story was different, but they all shared the same theme. Someone had believed in them when no one else did, and that belief had made all the difference. We did this, Victoria whispered, gripping his hand. We actually did something that matters. You sound surprised. I am. I've spent my whole life building things that don't matter, things that exist just to make money or prove I'm worthy of my father's legacy. This is different. This is real. One of the recipients, a girl named Jasmine, who'd been in foster care since she was 6, gave a speech that brought half the room to tears. She talked about believing she was destined for nothing, because that's what the world had always told her. Then she'd received the foundation's letter, and for the first time, someone had seen her potential instead of her circumstances. The Second Chance Foundation gave me exactly what the name promises, Jasmine said, her voice steady despite the emotion. A second chance to believe in myself. A second chance to dream. A second chance at a future I thought was impossible. And I'm going to make sure I honor that gift every single day. Ethan felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. Victoria was crying too, her carefully applied makeup running, and she'd never looked more beautiful to him. After the ceremony, they mingled with the recipients and their families. Mia had come with them, dressed in the same black dress from the funeral, but somehow making it work, and Ethan watched her talk to Jasmine with an easy confidence that made his heart swell with pride. "Your daughter is remarkable," Jasmine told him later. "She was asking about my plans, giving me advice about college applications. She's like, actually interested, not just being polite." "She learned from the best," Ethan said, thinking of Sarah, of the way she'd made everyone feel seen and valued. "You both did something incredible here," Jasmine continued. "This scholarship isn't just money. It's someone saying you matter, your dreams matter, your potential matters. That's everything." After everyone had left and the ballroom was empty except for staff breaking down tables, Ethan and Victoria stood at the window looking out at the city lights. "I want to expand it," Victoria said suddenly. "The foundation. I want to reach more kids, offer more support, not just scholarships, but mentorship, therapy, whatever they need to succeed." "That's ambitious." "I'm an ambitious person. I just finally found something worth being ambitious about." She turned to face him. "I'm stepping down from Lang Industries. I made the decision this morning. My resignation is effective end of August." Ethan felt his eyebrows rise. "That's huge, Victoria." "I know. It's terrifying and stupid and possibly the best decision I've ever made." She took his hands. "I want to build something that matters with you, Ethan. Not just the foundation, though, that too. I want to build a life. An actual life, not just the performance of one. What does that look like to you?" "I don't know yet. That's what makes it exciting. And terrifying, mostly terrifying." She laughed nervously. "I'm 40 years old, and I'm just now figuring out how to be a real person. Better late than never?" "Much better late than never." Ethan pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm proud of you. For walking away from what's safe, for choosing this." "I'm choosing you," Victoria corrected. "The foundation is part of it, but mostly I'm choosing us. Whatever that means." What it meant became clearer over the next few weeks as Victoria slowly integrated herself into the fabric of Ethan and Mia's life. She started keeping clothes at his apartment, then a toothbrush, then entire drawers full of her things. She came to Mia's soccer games and cheered louder than anyone else in the stands. She learned to cook, slowly and with many disasters, until she could make at least 3 meals that were genuinely edible. And somewhere in the mundane domesticity of it all, Ethan fell completely, irreversibly in love with her. Not the dramatic, all-consuming love of his youth, but something deeper and more solid. He loved the way she concentrated when reading foundation applications, her tongue poking out slightly between her teeth. He loved that she couldn't walk past a bookstore without buying something, even though she rarely had time to read. He loved her terrible cooking and her even worse singing and the way she made Mia laugh until she couldn't breathe. He loved her, and the realization didn't terrify him the way he'd expected it to. But saying it out loud felt like tempting fate, so he kept the words to himself and showed her instead. In the way he made her coffee exactly how she liked it. In the way he rubbed her shoulders when foundation work stressed her out. In the way he pulled her close at night and held her like she might disappear if he let go. August arrived with brutal heat and the looming reality of Victoria's last day as CEO. The Lang Industries board threw her a retirement party that was more performance than genuine celebration, and Ethan accompanied her in a suit he'd had to borrow from a colleague because he didn't own anything appropriate for events where champagne cost more per bottle than his weekly grocery budget. "You hate this," Victoria murmured as they stood together watching her former colleagues network and politic. "I don't hate it. I'm just observing from a distance." "You hate it." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for being here anyway." "Where else would I be?" The question was simple, but Victoria's eyes went bright with emotion. Before she could respond, the board chairman called for everyone's attention and launched into a speech about Victoria's tenure, her accomplishments, her legacy. It was all very polished and professional and completely impersonal, like they were talking about a competent machine instead of a human being. When it was Victoria's turn to speak, she stood at the podium looking every inch the powerful CEO she'd been. But her words surprised everyone, including Ethan. "I'm not going to pretend this was an easy decision," she began. "Lang Industries has been my life for 20 years. I built it, shaped it, sacrificed everything for it, and now I'm walking away, and some of you think I'm crazy." She paused, her eyes finding Ethan in the crowd. "But I've learned something important recently. Success without meaning is just expensive emptiness, and I'd rather have a meaningful life than a successful one." The room was silent, people shifting uncomfortably at this unexpected honesty. "I'm leaving to run a foundation that helps kids who've been told they don't matter, that their dreams are too big, that their circumstances define their destiny. I'm leaving to work with someone who reminds me every day that kindness is more valuable than power, that showing up is more important than showing off, that love, real love, is worth more than any empire I could build." Ethan felt his throat tighten as she continued. "My father spent his whole life trying to control everything and everyone around him. He died alone and bitter because he confused power with love, manipulation with protection. I don't want to die like that. I want to die knowing I made a difference, knowing I loved and was loved, knowing I chose people over profit every single time." She raised her glass. "So here's to second chances, to choosing differently, to building something that actually matters. Thank you all for everything, but I'm done now. And I've never been happier to be done with anything in my life." The applause was scattered and confused, but Ethan clapped until his hands hurt. As soon as Victoria stepped down from the podium, he met her halfway across the room and pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw or what they thought. "That was incredible," he said against her hair. "That was career suicide and possibly insane. It was honest. It was you." He pulled back to look at her. "The real you, not the performance. The real me is terrifying. The real you is perfect." They left the party early, drove back to Ethan's apartment where Mia was waiting with a celebratory cake she'd attempted to bake herself. It was lopsided and the frosting was sliding off one side, but it said, "Congratulations on being unemployed," in shaky letters, and it was the most beautiful thing Victoria had ever seen. "I helped," Mia said proudly. "By helped, I mean I did everything while Dad supervised." "I provided moral support," Ethan protested. "You ate half the frosting before I could put it on the cake." Victoria laughed until she cried, and they ate the terrible cake sitting on the living room floor while Mia regaled them with stories from her summer job at the library. It was ordinary and perfect, and Victoria realized this was what she'd been missing her entire life. Not grand gestures or expensive parties, but this: family, laughter, belonging. Later, after Mia had gone to bed and they were cleaning up the kitchen together, Victoria turned to Ethan with sudden seriousness. "Move in with me." He stopped mid-rinse, a plate dripping in his hands. "What?" "Move in with me. You and Mia. My penthouse is ridiculous for one person, and you're there half the time anyway, and I—" She paused, gathering courage. "I don't want to keep splitting our lives between two places. I want us to be in one place. Together." "Victoria, that's a huge step." "I know, but we've been dancing around this for months, pretending we're taking it slow when we both know we're already all in." "I love you, Ethan. I'm completely, terrifyingly in love with you, and I want to wake up next to you every morning, not just the nights you happen to stay over." The words hung in the air between them, the first time either had said them out loud. Ethan set down the plate very carefully, turned to face her fully. "Say that again," he said quietly. "Which part?" "The part where you love me." Victoria's smile was tremulous. "I love you. I love you in a way that's completely different from when we were 19, in a way that's more real and solid and absolutely terrifying. I love your terrible jokes and your thoughtful silences and the way you love Mia like she's the center of the universe. I love that you make me want to be better, do better, choose better. I love—" He kissed her, cutting off the words because if she kept talking, he was going to completely fall apart. When they broke apart, Victoria's eyes were bright with hope and fear. "I love you too," Ethan said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff and finding wings. I've been in love with you for months, maybe longer. I was just too scared to say it. And now? I'm still scared, but I'm saying it anyway. He took her hands. Yes, we'll move in with you. But we need to ask Mia first. Make sure she's okay with it. Of course. I wouldn't dream of making this decision without her input. They found Mia in her room, supposedly asleep, but obviously awake, and reading with a flashlight under her covers. She looked up when they knocked, not even bothering to hide the book. What's up? Victoria has a question for us, Ethan said, sitting on the edge of her bed. A big one. Mia sat up, suddenly alert. Are you getting married? What? No. I mean, not yet. Victoria stumbled over her words, flustered in a way Ethan had rarely seen. We're not talking about marriage right now, but I did ask your dad if you both wanted to move in with me, into my penthouse. Mia's eyes went wide. The one with the huge windows and the balcony and the bathroom that's bigger than our entire apartment? That's the one. And you're asking my opinion? Like, it actually matters what I think. Of course it matters, Victoria said firmly. This would be your home too. If you're not comfortable with it, we won't do it. Your feelings are just as important as anyone else's. Mia looked at her father, then back at Victoria, processing. Can I ask you something first? And you have to be honest. Anything, Victoria promised. Are you going to leave? Like, are you in this for real? Or is this just some temporary thing until you get bored or realize we're too normal for your fancy life? The question was blunt and painful, and Ethan saw Victoria flinch, but she didn't look away, didn't soften her answer with platitudes. I can't promise I won't mess this up, Victoria said quietly. I've never done this before. The whole family thing, the domestic partnership thing, being someone's stepmom thing. I'm going to make mistakes. Big ones, probably. But I can promise you this. I'm not going anywhere. I love your dad, and I love you, and I'm choosing this life over everything else. You're stuck with me, kid. Mia studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, then yes. Let's move into the fancy penthouse, but I get to decorate my own room, and I'm not giving up Chaos the cat. Done and done, Victoria said, relief flooding her face. Though I should warn you, I've never had a pet. I might need lessons. Oh, Chaos will teach you, Mia said ominously. He's an excellent teacher in the ways of destruction and chaos, hence the name. They moved the last weekend of August, and it was complete chaos indeed. Ethan had accumulated less stuff than he'd thought over the years, but somehow it still took multiple trips in a borrowed truck to get everything to Victoria's building. The doorman looked increasingly alarmed as they carried up boxes of books, Mia's soccer equipment, kitchen supplies that Victoria's pristine chef's kitchen had never seen. This is insane, Ethan said, surveying the mountain of boxes in Victoria's, their, living room. How did we have this much stuff? I have more, Mia called from her new bedroom, which was indeed bigger than their entire old apartment. I found 3 more boxes in the hall closet. Victoria appeared from the kitchen carrying 2 glasses of wine and a juice box. I ordered pizza, figured we'd earned it after today. You didn't even help move boxes, Ethan pointed out, taking the wine gratefully. I supervised, that's helping. You sat on the couch and directed traffic. Exactly. Someone had to maintain order. She clinked her glass against his. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, he echoed, and kissed her over the rim of his glass. That night, after Mia had passed out in her new room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, Ethan and Victoria stood on the balcony looking out at the city. It was the same view she'd had for 8 years, but it looked different now. Less lonely, more like home. Are you happy? Victoria asked quietly. Yeah, Ethan said, and meant it. Terrified and happy in equal measure. That seems to be our default state. Could be worse. We could be bored. Victoria laughed, leaning into him. I don't think bored is in our future, not with Mia around. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below them. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. A helicopter passed overhead. Normal city sounds, but they felt different now. This was their city, their life, their future, spread out below them like a map they were drawing together. Thank you, Victoria said suddenly. For what? For giving me this. for letting me be part of your family, for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. You never gave me a reason to give up on you, Victoria. You just gave me reasons to stay. She turned to face him, and in the city lights her eyes were bright with emotion. I want to marry you someday. Not now, not when we're still figuring this out, but someday. I want to stand up in front of everyone and choose you, publicly and permanently. Is that crazy? Probably, Ethan admitted, but I want that too. Yeah? Yeah? He pulled her closer. Someday, when we're both less terrified and more sure, I'm going to ask you to marry me. And you're going to say yes. And we're going to build a life that would have made your father furious and my 19-year-old self completely shocked. I can't wait, Victoria said, and kissed him like she meant it. Inside, they could hear Mia moving around, unpacking despite the late hour, making the space her own. Their daughter, because that's what she was becoming, slowly but surely, singing off-key to music only she could hear. The cat meowed loudly, probably knocking something expensive off a shelf. The apartment was a disaster of boxes and displacement and new beginnings. And standing there on the balcony with the woman he loved and the life they were building together, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Complete. Not healed, not undamaged, but whole in a way that accommodated the cracks and learned to hold light anyway. The debt Victoria had come to collect had been paid in full, not with anger or revenge, but with something far more powerful. They'd taken what Richard Lang had stolen and built something better from the wreckage. They'd chosen each other, not once, but over and over, in small moments and big decisions, until choosing became as natural as breathing. And that, Ethan thought as Victoria laughed at something Mia shouted from inside, was worth more than any fortune Richard Lang could have left behind. The first real test came in October, 3 months after they'd moved in together, when everything still felt new enough to be fragile. Ethan came home from school to find Victoria sitting on the couch with her laptop closed, staring at nothing, her face pale and drawn. What's wrong? He dropped his bag by the door, immediately alert to the wrongness in her posture. The board is fighting the foundation. Her voice was flat, drained of emotion. They're claiming my father wasn't of sound mind when he made the will. They want to contest it, tie everything up in litigation for years. Ethan felt ice settle in his stomach. Can they do that? They can try. Preston says we have a strong case. Your father had multiple doctors assess his mental capacity before finalizing the will, and they all confirmed he was lucid and competent. But legal battles are expensive and exhausting, and the board has deep pockets. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were haunted. They're doing this because I walked away, because I chose the foundation over the company. This is their revenge. Then we fight back. With what? Legal fees will drain the foundation's resources before we even get to help any more kids. We'd be spending Richard's money fighting over Richard's money, while the people who actually need it get nothing. She laughed bitterly. He's still controlling us from the grave, still making sure we can't escape his legacy. Ethan sat beside her, took her cold hands in his. We have options. We can negotiate with them, find a compromise. I don't want to compromise with them. They're doing this out of spite and greed, and I'm tired of people like them winning just because they have more resources. Victoria's voice cracked. I'm tired of fighting, Ethan. I'm so tired. He pulled her close, felt her shoulders shake with silent sobs. This was the fear he'd been carrying since they'd started building this life together, that the weight of her old world would crush what they were trying to create, that money and power and the ghosts of her father's empire would destroy the fragile peace they'd found. Mia came home an hour later to find them still on the couch, Victoria's eyes red from crying, Ethan holding her like she might shatter. What happened? Mia demanded, immediately protective. They explained the situation, and Mia's face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, determination. That's garbage, complete garbage. We have to do something. Like what? Victoria asked tiredly. They have armies of lawyers and unlimited resources. So we get creative, we go public. Mia was pacing now, thinking out loud. We tell the story of what your father did, why the foundation exists. We let people see that the board is trying to take money away from kids who need it just because they're mad you left. Public opinion matters, right? It does, Victoria admitted. But that's a nuclear option. Once we tell that story, there's no taking it back. My father's reputation, my family's legacy, it all gets destroyed. Good, Mia said fiercely. He destroyed you and Dad. He stole 20 years from you. Why should you protect his reputation? Victoria looked at Ethan, a question in her eyes. What do you think? He thought about the letters, about two young people who'd had their choices stolen by a man who thought he knew better. He thought about Richard Lang dying in his big, empty house, trying to buy redemption he didn't deserve. And he thought about the kids they'd helped, the ones they could still help if they survived this fight. I think, Ethan said carefully, that the truth matters more than protecting a dead man's legacy. And I think Mia's right. If we're going to fight, we should fight with the one weapon they can't match: honesty. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. Okay, we tell the truth. All of it. They spent the next week preparing. Victoria wrote out the full story. Her father's manipulation, the intercepted letters, the forced separation, the deathbed confession, the will designed to force reconciliation. Ethan added his perspective, the years of believing he'd been abandoned, the walls he'd built, the ways that lie had shaped his entire life. They made it clear that the foundation wasn't about Richard Lang's redemption, but about turning his worst impulses into something good. The local news picked up the story first, then the national outlets. Within days, Victoria's face was everywhere. Not as the Ice Queen CEO she'd been, but as a woman who'd escaped her father's control and was fighting to help others do the same. The internet, predictably, had opinions. Some people accused her of airing family drama for publicity. Others saw her as a hero, standing up to corporate greed. The foundation's website crashed from traffic, and donations poured in from strangers who wanted to help. The board, unprepared for the public backlash, backed down within 2 weeks. They dropped the lawsuit and issued a carefully worded statement about respecting Richard Lang's wishes. It was a victory, but it didn't feel triumphant. It felt exhausting. Is it always going to be like this? Victoria asked one night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Fighting off attacks, defending our right to exist, constantly looking over our shoulders? I don't know, Ethan admitted. Maybe. Or maybe it gets easier once we're not news anymore. I miss being boring. I miss when our biggest problem was burning dinner. You still burn dinner regularly, but now I do it while being publicly scrutinized. She rolled to face him. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You could have walked away, had a nice quiet life. Instead, you're dating a woman whose family drama plays out in headlines. I chose this, Ethan reminded her. I chose you. Drama and all. Why? Honestly, why would you choose this chaos? He thought about how to answer, how to put into words the thing that had been growing in him for months. Because boring is safe, but it's not living, because you make me want to be brave instead of careful. Because when I'm with you, I feel like the person I was supposed to become before loss taught me to play it safe. He touched her face gently. And because I love you. Not despite the chaos, but including it. All of it. Victoria kissed him, and he tasted salt from tears he hadn't realized she was crying. I don't deserve you. Nobody deserves anybody. We just choose each other and hope it's enough. Is it? Enough? So far, Ethan said, and meant it. The foundation stabilized after the lawsuit threat disappeared. More donations came in, enough to expand their reach beyond just Chicago. They opened satellite offices in 3 other cities, hired staff who actually knew what they were doing, built a mentorship program that connected scholarship recipients with professionals in their fields. The work was hard and sometimes heartbreaking, but it mattered in a way nothing else in Victoria's life ever had. Thanksgiving came, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt like they had something to celebrate. He invited Victoria's assistant, Marcus, who had nowhere to go for the holiday. Mia invited 3 friends from school, the penthouse filled with noise and laughter and the smell of turkey that Victoria insisted on cooking herself despite Ethan's very reasonable concerns about her culinary abilities. If I burn it, we order Chinese, she said, shooing him out of the kitchen. But I'm not burning it. I watched 17 YouTube videos. I'm prepared. The turkey was only slightly dry, and the mashed potatoes were lumpy, but nobody cared. They crammed around the dining table that had probably never hosted an actual meal before Victoria moved in, passing dishes and telling stories and being loud in a way the apartment's expensive walls had never experienced. Marcus, a quiet man in his 50s, who'd been Victoria's assistant for a decade, raised his glass halfway through dinner. I just want to say thank you for including me today, for making me feel like family. You are family, Victoria said firmly. You've put up with me for 10 years. That makes you family whether you like it or not. I like it, Marcus said, smiling. I like it very much. After everyone had left and Mia had gone to bed in a food coma, Ethan and Victoria cleaned up the kitchen together. It was domestic and ordinary and exactly what Ethan had been craving without knowing it. This simple intimacy of shared tasks and comfortable silence. I was thinking, Victoria said, loading the dishwasher with more enthusiasm than skill. What if we sold the Lake Forest estate? Ethan paused mid-wipe. I thought we were using it for foundation events. We are, but it's huge and expensive to maintain, and every time I go there I feel like I'm 19 again, trying to please a father who couldn't be pleased. She closed the dishwasher, turned to face him. What if we sold it and used the money to build something new? A proper headquarters for the foundation, with space for workshops and mentorship programs and maybe residential facilities for kids who need a safe place to stay while they figure out their futures. That's ambitious. I know, but I keep thinking about what that house represents: wealth and control and family legacy. What if we literally tore it down and built something that represents the opposite: opportunity and freedom and chosen family? Ethan pulled her close, impressed by the poetry of it. Richard would hate that. I know, Victoria said with satisfaction. That's part of why I want to do it. They put the estate on the market in December, and it sold within 3 weeks to a tech entrepreneur who promised to preserve its historical character. Victoria smiled through the closing, deposited the check, and immediately started working with architects on designs for the new foundation headquarters. She was relentless about it, spending hours reviewing plans, insisting on spaces that felt welcoming rather than institutional, demanding that every detail serve the kids they were trying to help. You found your calling, Ethan observed one evening, watching her argue passionately with an architect about the importance of natural light in study spaces. Is it weird that designing a building is the most excited I've been about anything in years? Not weird, perfect actually. You're good at this. I'm good at a lot of things, Victoria said. I just spent most of my life being good at things that didn't matter. Christmas came, and Ethan was determined to make it special. It was their first major holiday as a blended family, and he wanted to get it right. He spent hours shopping for the perfect gifts, decorating the penthouse with help from Mia, planning a dinner that wouldn't require Victoria's questionable cooking skills. On Christmas Eve, they exchanged gifts in front of the tree, a massive thing that had required 3 delivery people and considerable negotiation to fit through the door. Mia opened her presents with teenage enthusiasm, squealing over clothes and books and the new laptop they'd saved up for. Victoria opened hers more carefully, like she wasn't quite used to receiving thoughtful gifts. Ethan had gotten her a first edition of her favorite book from college, the one she'd mentioned offhand 3 months ago and probably didn't think he'd remembered. She held it like it was made of glass, tears streaming down her face. How did you even find this? She asked. Internet, persistence, and a credit card I'm trying not to think about. He wiped away her tears with his thumb. You mentioned it once, about how you'd sold your copy when you needed money for textbooks, and you'd always regretted it. I can't believe you remembered that. I remember everything you tell me. Victoria set the book down very carefully, then pulled something from behind the tree, a large envelope, official-looking and sealed with care. This is for both of you, she said, handing it to Ethan. Inside were legal documents, adoption papers, already filled out, just waiting for signatures. Ethan stared at them, not quite processing what he was seeing. I want to adopt Mia, Victoria said quietly. If she'll let me, if you'll let me. I know I can never replace Sarah, and I wouldn't want to. But I love her like she's mine, and I want it to be official. I want her to know that I'm choosing her permanently and publicly. Mia had been reading over her father's shoulder, and now she launched herself at Victoria, hugging her so hard they both nearly fell over. Yes, Mia said, her voice muffled against Victoria's shoulder. Yes, absolutely yes. You're sure? Victoria asked, holding her tight. This is a big deal. It means you're stuck with me forever. I know. I want to be stuck with you forever. Mia pulled back, wiping her eyes. Can I call you Mom, or is that weird? Victoria's face crumpled. That's not weird. That's perfect. Ethan watched his daughter and the woman he loved hold each other and cry happy tears, and he felt something shift in his chest. This was family. Not the one he'd planned, not the one he'd lost, but the one they'd built together from broken pieces and second chances. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely real. "So we're really doing this?" he asked. "Officially becoming a family?" "We've been a family for months," Victoria said. "This just makes it legal." They signed the papers on New Year's Day, standing in a judge's office with Marcus as their witness because he'd become as much family as anyone. The judge, a kind woman in her 60s who'd seen 1,000 families configured 1,000 ways, smiled at them warmly. "I've read your story," she said, "about the foundation, about what you're building. It's remarkable. And this," she gestured to the adoption papers, "this is the best part. Choosing family instead of accepting the one you were given. That's what love looks like." After it was official, after Mia's last name was legally changed to include both Cole and Lang, they went out for celebratory pancakes at a diner that didn't care about their unusual family structure or their complicated backstory. They were just another family out for breakfast, laughing too loud and stealing food off each other's plates. "Can I ask you something?" Mia said, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "Are you guys going to get married?" Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. "That's subtle." "I'm just saying, you're already living together and raising me and running a foundation. You're basically married already. Might as well make it official." Victoria and Ethan exchanged a look, a whole conversation happening in the silence. "We've talked about it," Victoria admitted, "but we wanted to make sure you were comfortable with everything first. The adoption felt like the priority." "Well, I'm comfortable. Very comfortable. Extremely comfortable." Mia grinned. "So what are you waiting for?" "Apparently nothing," Ethan said, reaching across the table to take Victoria's hand. "Victoria Lang, will you marry me? Here, in this diner, with our daughter as witness and pancakes as our witness, and absolutely no planning whatsoever." Victoria laughed, bright and free. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "It's also the only proposal you've ever heard." "Good point." She squeezed his hand. "Yes, absolutely yes. But I'm planning an actual proposal later, something romantic and thoughtful that doesn't involve a Denny's." "This isn't a Denny's," Mia protested. "This is Bob's House of Pancakes, completely different." "My apologies to Bob," Victoria said solemnly. "His pancakes are witnessing a very important moment." They planned the wedding for May, when the new foundation headquarters would be finished and ready for its grand opening. It felt right to celebrate both things together, the building they'd created and the family they'd become. Victoria wanted something simple, just close friends and family in a space that mattered. Ethan agreed immediately, relieved to avoid the kind of elaborate society wedding her father would have demanded. The foundation headquarters rose on the north side, on land that had once been a closed factory. Another kind of rebirth, another kind of second chance. Victoria had worked with the architects to create something that felt warm and welcoming rather than institutional. Lots of windows, comfortable furniture, bright colors, spaces designed for collaboration and creativity, and the messy work of becoming who you were meant to be. The week before the opening, they took Mia to see the finished building. She walked through the halls with wide eyes, touching walls, peering into classrooms and study spaces and the small apartments that would house kids who needed a safe place to land. "This is incredible," she breathed. "Like, actually life-changing incredible." "That's the idea," Victoria said. "Every detail is designed to tell kids they matter, that their futures matter, that someone believes in them." "Someone like you believed in Dad when he was 19, Mia said. "And someone like Dad believed in you when you needed to walk away from everything. And now you both believe in all these kids who need it. It's like this perfect circle of believing in people." "When did you get so wise?" Ethan asked automatically, then stopped himself. "Actually, don't answer that. I know you're wise. I should stop being surprised by it." "Finally," Mia said, grinning. The grand opening happened on a perfect May afternoon, the kind of spring day Chicago offers up as an apology for brutal winters. Hundreds of people came. Scholarship recipients, past and present, donors, supporters, the kids who'd already been selected for the residential program. The mayor gave a speech about opportunity and second chances. Victoria and Ethan stood together, watching their impossible dream become solid and real. "We did this," Ethan said, echoing Victoria's words from the first scholarship ceremony. "We did," she agreed. "Your move, by the way, for the actual proposal." "What?" "You proposed in a pancake house. That doesn't count. I'm waiting for the real thing." "You're ridiculous." "I'm patient. I've waited 20 years. I can wait a little longer for a proper proposal." Ethan laughed, kissed her in front of everyone, not caring who saw. "Okay, challenge accepted." He proposed 2 days later at the college library where they'd met 2 decades earlier. He'd arranged it secretly, getting permission from the university, setting up with help from Mia, who'd been sworn to absolute secrecy. When Victoria arrived, thinking they were meeting for dinner, she found the library transformed. Candles everywhere, probably a fire hazard, but beautiful. Photos of them then and now covering the tables. And Ethan, standing exactly where he'd been standing the first time she'd seen him, 20 years ago, when they were young and stupid and certain love was easy. "What is this?" Victoria asked, tears already starting. "This is me doing it right." Ethan took her hands. 20 years ago, I met you in this library. You were reading Byron and arguing with the text, and I fell in love with you so hard and so fast it scared me. Then I lost you, and I spent 20 years believing that love was something that disappeared, that people left, that the best you could hope for was comfortable numbness. Ethan, let me finish. You came back into my life like a storm, bringing truth and chaos, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, second chances were real. You forced me to confront the lies I'd been telling myself. You loved my daughter like she was yours. You walked away from everything safe and comfortable to build something that mattered. And you made me believe again. In love. In possibilities. In the idea that broken things can be remade into something even stronger. He dropped to one knee, and Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. "Victoria Lang, you are brilliant and difficult and the bravest person I've ever met. You burn pasta and cry at commercials and work harder than anyone I know to be better than you were yesterday. And I love you. Not the girl you were, but the woman you've become. So will you marry me? For real this time, with a ring and planning and all the traditional things we probably should have done the first time around?" He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry her father would have chosen. Victoria nodded through her tears, unable to speak, just nodding and crying and letting him slide the ring onto her finger. "Is that a yes?" he asked, grinning. "That's a yes," she managed. "That's an absolutely, completely, 100% yes." Mia emerged from behind a bookshelf, phone in hand, having recorded the whole thing. "That was perfect, Dad. Way better than the Pancake House proposal. You were hiding back there the whole time. Obviously, someone had to document this for posterity." She hugged them both. "Also, I'm very happy for you, but can we go eat now? All this romance is making me hungry." The wedding happened 3 weeks later in the foundation's courtyard. Surrounded by flowers, Mia and Victoria had planted together and attended by the people who'd become their chosen family. Marcus walked Victoria down the aisle because she had no father to do it and wanted someone who'd chosen to be in her life rather than someone obligated by blood. Mia stood as Ethan's best person, reading a poem Sarah had loved about new beginnings and choosing joy. They wrote their own vows, because traditional words didn't fit their untraditional story. Victoria went first, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, 20 years ago we loved each other with the passion of people who didn't know any better. We thought love was enough, that wanting something hard enough would make it real. We were wrong. Love isn't enough. It also requires choice and courage and showing up every day even when it's hard. Today I'm choosing you, not because someone is forcing us together, but because I want to. I choose your terrible jokes and your thoughtfulness and the way you make me want to be better. I choose Mia and this family we've built from broken pieces. I choose us every day for the rest of my life." Ethan's vows were simpler, but no less true. "Victoria, you taught me that second chances are real, that broken hearts can heal stronger than they were before, that love doesn't have to be safe to be real. I promise to choose you every day, in big decisions and small moments. I promise to be brave when you need me to be, and vulnerable when that's what we need. I promise to build this life with you, honestly and openly, until we're old and gray and still burning dinner together. I love you. Then, now, always. The judge from the adoption, they'd asked her specifically, pronounced them married, and Ethan kissed his wife while their daughter cheered and their chosen family applauded. It was small and perfect, and nothing like the elaborate society wedding Victoria's father would have demanded. It was theirs. The reception was casual, just dinner and dancing in the foundation building's main hall. They'd hired a DJ who actually understood that weddings should be fun rather than stuffy. And even Marcus was persuaded onto the dance floor after 3 glasses of champagne. Ethan watched Victoria spin around the floor with Mia, both of them laughing, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the certainty that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. Late in the evening, when the party was winding down and people were gathering their things, one of their scholarship recipients, a young man named Jordan, who'd grown up in foster care, approached them shyly. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "Not just for the scholarship, but for this. For showing people like me that families can be chosen, that second chances are real, that broken beginnings don't define your ending." "You did that yourself," Victoria said gently. "We just gave you resources. You're the one doing the work." "But you believed I could. That's everything." Jordan smiled. "My social worker used to tell me I'd never amount to anything because I didn't have a real family. Now I'm going to medical school and I'm standing at a wedding of people who built a real family from scratch. That matters. Just knowing it's possible, that matters." After he walked away, Victoria turned to Ethan with tears in her eyes. That's why we did all of this. That moment right there." "I know," Ethan said, holding her close. "And we're going to create thousands more moments like that, because that's what we do now. We give people second chances." "Speaking of second chances," Mia interrupted, appearing beside them, "when are you guys going on your honeymoon? Because I've been planning it with Marcus and we have ideas." "We're going on a honeymoon?" Ethan asked Victoria. "Apparently we are. I didn't know about this either." "It's a surprise," Mia said. "We've booked you a week in Italy. Flights leave tomorrow night." "Tomorrow? Mia, we can't just—" "You can and you will," she said firmly. "Marcus and I are perfectly capable of running things for a week. You two need a break. Also, you need a proper honeymoon where you don't think about work or foundation stuff or anything except being married and gross and in love." Victoria laughed. "She makes a compelling argument." "She makes a terrifying argument," Ethan corrected. "How are you so organized? You're 14. 13, Mia corrected. "And I'm organized because I learned from the best." She hugged them both. "Go to Italy. Eat pasta. Be happy. Let someone else worry about the world for 5 minutes." They went to Italy, and it was perfect in all the ways things are when you stop trying to control every outcome. They got lost in Venice, ate too much gelato in Florence, drank wine on a balcony in Rome while the city hummed below them. They talked about everything and nothing, made love like people who finally believed they had time, and slowly let themselves relax into the reality that this was actually happening. This life they'd built was actually real. On their last night, sitting on that balcony in Rome, Victoria turned to Ethan with sudden seriousness. "I'm happy," she said. "Like genuinely, completely happy. When's the last time you could say that?" Ethan thought about it. "Not since before Sarah got sick. Maybe not even then, because there was always this background fear that something would go wrong. But now—" He trailed off, searching for words. "Now you believe it might last," Victoria finished. "Yeah, I believe it might last, or at least I believe it's worth the risk, even if it doesn't. That's called growth, my love. You've become annoyingly well-adjusted. So have you. What happened to the Ice Queen CEO who showed up at my door in a designer coat?" "She melted," Victoria said simply. "Turns out all she needed was someone who saw past the armor to the person underneath. Someone who wasn't impressed by money or power or carefully constructed walls. Someone who just wanted her to be real." "I'm glad I could help with that," Ethan said. "You did more than help. You saved me. From my father's legacy, from myself, from a life that looked successful but felt empty." She took his hand. "I came to collect a debt that night, but it turns out the debt wasn't what I thought. It wasn't about what you owed me or what my father owed us. It was about what we owed ourselves." "Which was?" "A chance, a real chance to build something honest and messy and completely our own. To choose each other instead of having our choices stolen. to believe that broken things could be remade into something even better than the original. Ethan pulled her close, looking out at Rome spread below them, ancient and eternal and still standing after everything history had thrown at it. "So what do we do now?" "We go home," Victoria said, "to our daughter and our foundation and our complicated, imperfect, absolutely real life. We keep choosing each other. We keep showing up. We keep building something that matters." "That sounds perfect." "It sounds terrifying," she corrected, "but we'll do it anyway." They flew home to Chicago with full hearts and empty luggage, having bought too many gifts for Mia and Marcus and everyone at the foundation. The penthouse felt different when they walked in, smaller somehow, more like home than Victoria's expensive showcase ever had. Mia was asleep in her room, a note on the counter letting them know everything had gone smoothly, and she expected a full report in the morning. Ethan stood at the window looking out at the city, at the lights and chaos and millions of lives being lived in thousands of different ways. Somewhere out there were kids like he'd been, smart and trapped by circumstances they didn't choose. Somewhere were kids like Mia, strong and scared and trying to figure out how to grieve and live at the same time. And somewhere were people like Victoria, successful and lost, wondering if there was more to life than what they'd been taught to want. The foundation would reach some of them, would give them chances, resources, belief. It wouldn't save everyone. Nothing could do that. But it would save some, and some was everything. Victoria came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" How impossible this all seemed 6 months ago. How sure I was that opening myself up to anything new would just lead to more loss. He turned to face her. How completely wrong I was. Well, we were both wrong about a lot of things. But we're learning. That's what second chances are for, getting it right the second time around. "Or at least failing better," Ethan said. "Or that." Victoria smiled. "I can live with failing better as long as we do it together." The weeks turned to months, and their life settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. They ran the foundation together, splitting responsibilities based on their strengths. Victoria handling strategy and operations, Ethan focusing on the human side, on mentorship, and making sure they never lost sight of why they were doing this. Mia thrived in her new school, made friends, joined clubs, slowly becoming the person she was meant to be without loss defining every aspect of her identity. On the anniversary of Sarah's death, they all went to her grave together. Ethan had worried it might be awkward, bringing Victoria to visit his dead wife. But Mia had insisted they should all go, that Sarah would have wanted to meet the woman who'd helped put their family back together. They stood in the cemetery, Mia placing flowers on the grave while Ethan felt the familiar ache of loss mixed with something new. Gratitude. Gratitude for the years he'd had with Sarah, for the daughter they'd created together, for the way she'd taught him that love could be steady and real. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly, as if Sarah could hear her. "For loving him well, for teaching him how to be open even after being hurt, for giving him Mia, who's the most remarkable person I've ever met. I promise I'll take care of them both. Not the way you did. I could never do that. But in my own imperfect way. And I promise to make sure they both know how loved they were, how loved they are. By you." Ethan felt tears on his face and didn't wipe them away. "She would have liked you," he told Victoria. "Eventually, after she got over being jealous and territorial, which she absolutely would have been." "I would have liked her too," Victoria said. "Anyone who raised a kid like Mia must have been pretty spectacular." "She was," Mia said, "but you're pretty spectacular too, in different ways, and I think—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think she'd be happy that you're here, that Dad's not alone anymore, that we're a family again, even if it's a different kind of family than we were." They stood together in the cemetery, 3 people bound by choice and loss and love, saying goodbye to the past while holding tight to the future. It wasn't closure exactly. Grief didn't work that way. But it was acknowledgement, permission to move forward without forgetting what came before. That night, lying in bed, Victoria turned to Ethan with sudden intensity. "I want to have a baby," she said. Ethan blinked, processing. "What?" "I want to have a baby. With you. A biological child, if we can. I know I'm 41 and it might not work and there are a million reasons it's impractical, but I want to try. She was talking fast now, nervous. I never wanted kids before because I didn't know how to be anything except my father's daughter. But now I'm learning how to be a person, and I think maybe I could learn how to be a mother too. A real one, not just legally. You already are a real mother, Ethan said. To Mia. I know, and I love that, but I want this too. Is that selfish? Is it stupid? Ethan thought about it honestly. Another child would complicate everything. Their work, their lives, their carefully constructed balance. But it would also be a testament to what they'd built. Proof that second chances could create something entirely new. It's not stupid, he said. It's brave. And kind of terrifying, but also kind of perfect. So we can try? We can try. He pulled her close. No guarantees it'll work. We might be too old, or it might just not happen. But we can try. That's all I'm asking. A chance. They tried. It took longer than either of them expected. Months of negative tests and disappointments and conversations about whether to pursue fertility treatments. Victoria was 42 by then, and the doctors kept gently suggesting that perhaps this wasn't meant to be. But she persisted with the same determination she'd brought to everything else, and Ethan loved her for it, even as he worried about the toll each failure took. Then on a random Tuesday in November, Victoria took a test, and it came back positive. She didn't tell Ethan right away. She made a doctor's appointment, got confirmation, let herself believe it was real before sharing the news. When she finally told him, showing him the ultrasound picture at dinner, Ethan just stared at the tiny blob on the screen that would become their child. Are you happy? Victoria asked nervously. I know this is huge and unexpected and kind of insane, and he kissed her, cutting off the anxious rambling. I'm terrified and happy in equal measure, which seems to be our default state. That's what I said when we moved in together. It's still true. They told Mia that night, sitting her down with appropriate seriousness. Her reaction was not what they expected. Finally, she said, I've been waiting for you guys to figure this out for months. You wanted us to have a baby? Victoria asked, confused. Of course. I'm going to college in 4 years. You're going to be lonely without me. This way you have a backup kid. She grinned at their expressions. Also, I've always wanted a sibling. This is perfect. When's it due? July, Victoria said. If everything goes okay, there's always a risk, especially at my age. It'll be okay, Mia said with the certainty of youth. You're both too stubborn to let anything go wrong. The pregnancy was harder than Victoria's first trimester had prepared them for. She was sick constantly, exhausted, emotional in ways that surprised all of them. Ethan watched her transform from the controlled CEO to someone vulnerable and occasionally irrational, and he loved her more for it. This was the final wall coming down, the last piece of armor being shed. She was letting him see her at her most human, and it was terrifying and beautiful. The baby, a boy, they learned at 20 weeks, arrived in early July during a thunderstorm that knocked out power to half the city. Victoria labored through contractions in a hospital room lit by emergency generators, squeezing Ethan's hand hard enough to leave bruises, cursing him comprehensively for his role in this situation. I take it back, she panted between contractions. All of it. The marriage, the baby, everything. I'm done. You can't take it back now, Ethan said, trying not to laugh. He's almost here. Watch me. I'm excellent at walking away from commitments. Ask my father's company. But when the baby finally arrived, screaming and perfect, Victoria held him and cried in a way Ethan had never seen before. Not sad tears or frustrated tears or even happy tears exactly. Something deeper, transformative. Hi, she whispered to the baby. I'm your mom. I'm probably going to mess this up a lot, but I promise I'll try my best. They named him James Richard Cole Lang, James for Ethan's father, who died when Ethan was in college, Richard for Victoria's father, because despite everything, he'd brought them back together, and that deserved acknowledgement even if it didn't warrant forgiveness. Mia met her brother in the hospital, holding him with the careful intensity of someone who understood how fragile new things could be. He's perfect, she pronounced. Tiny and weird-looking, but perfect. All babies are weird-looking, Ethan said. Yeah, but this one's our weird-looking baby. That makes him perfect. They brought James home to chaos and sleeplessness and the particular exhaustion that comes with newborns. Victoria, who'd run a company and managed millions of dollars, was completely undone by a 7-pound human who needed constant attention. She cried at commercials, panicked over every small noise, and called the pediatrician so many times the nurse recognized her voice. "I'm terrible at this," she said one night at 3 a.m., holding a crying James and looking completely defeated. "I don't know what he needs. I don't know how to fix it." "Nobody knows how to fix it," Ethan said gently, taking the baby so Victoria could rest. "You just do your best and hope it's enough." "What if it's not enough?" "What if I damage him? Then we'll deal with that when he's older and needs therapy. But right now you're doing fine." "Better than fine? You're showing up, trying, loving him. That's all any parent can do." Victoria watched him walk the baby, soothing James's cries with practiced movements he'd learned with Mia. "You're good at this. I've had practice. You'll get there." "What if I don't? What if I'm like my father, incapable of actual love, just going through the motions?" "You're nothing like your father," Ethan said firmly. "Richard Lang wouldn't have cried over every developmental milestone or called the pediatrician 12 times in one day or sat here at 3 in the morning worrying about being good enough. You love this baby so much it scares you. That's the opposite of your father." Victoria started crying again. Hormones and exhaustion and fear all tangled together. "I just want to do it right. I want him to grow up knowing he's loved unconditionally, that his worth isn't tied to achievement or success or pleasing anyone. I want him to be free in ways I never was." "Then that's what we'll give him," Ethan promised. "Freedom and love and the space to become whoever he wants to be." The first year with James was beautiful and exhausting and occasionally overwhelming, but they figured it out together, with help from Mia, who turned out to be a natural with her brother, and from Marcus, who showed up weekly with groceries and moral support. The foundation work continued, though at a slower pace, and they learned to balance ambition with the reality of having a newborn. On James's first birthday, they threw a party at the foundation headquarters, now fully operational and serving kids from across the city. Scholarship recipients came, staff came, the families they'd helped came. It was loud and chaotic and exactly right. Jasmine, the girl who'd given the speech at their first ceremony, brought her younger sister who was applying for a scholarship herself. "You changed my life," she told Victoria. "I'm pre-med now, on track to graduate in 3 years. And my sister gets to see that futures like ours are possible because you both believed in us." "You did the work," Victoria said. "We just provided resources." "You provided hope," Jasmine corrected. "Sometimes that's more valuable than resources." Later, standing on the building's balcony while the party continued inside, Ethan and Victoria watched the city spread before them. James was asleep in his stroller. Mia was inside teaching some of the younger kids a complicated card game, and for once, everything felt exactly right. "Can you believe we did all this in 2 years?" Victoria asked. "No," Ethan admitted. 2 years ago, I was a high school teacher living in a tiny apartment, convinced my life was as good as it would ever get. Now, I'm married to you, we have a son, we've helped hundreds of kids, and I'm happy. Like genuinely happy, not just content." "What changed?" "You knocked on my door and refused to let me hide anymore. You forced me to confront the lies I'd been telling myself about love and loss and second chances." He took her hand. "You saved me, Victoria. From a life half-lived, from comfortable numbness, from believing the best was behind me." "You saved me too," she said softly. "From my father's legacy. From a life that looked successful but felt empty. From believing that love was just another form of control. You taught me what real love looks like. Showing up, being honest, choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their impossible life happen all around them. Inside, Mia laughed at something, the sound carrying through the open door. James stirred in his sleep, making the small noises newborns make. Somewhere in the building, kids were studying, working toward futures they'd been told were impossible, believing in themselves because someone else had believed first. This was what they'd built from the wreckage of Richard Lang's manipulation. Not just a foundation or a family, but proof that second chances were real, that broken things could be remade stronger, that love, real, honest, complicated love, was worth every risk. "I love you," Ethan said. Not for the first time, not even for the 100th time, but saying it still felt important. Still felt like a choice he made daily, consciously, gratefully. "I love you too," Victoria replied. "Then now, always." And in standing there on that balcony with their whole messy, imperfect, absolutely real life spread before them, Ethan knew that the debt Victoria had come to collect that snowy night had been paid in full. Not with anger or revenge, but with forgiveness and courage and the willingness to try again. They'd taken what was stolen and built something better. They'd chosen each other over and over until choosing became as natural as breathing. The snow had long since melted, replaced by summer heat and possibility. But the choice they'd made that first night, to open the door, to risk everything, to believe in second chances, that choice remained, solid and true, and worth every terrifying moment it took to get here. Some debts couldn't be paid with money or apologies. Some required something far more valuable, the courage to love again, to trust again, to believe that broken beginnings didn't have to mean broken endings. And that debt, paid slowly over 2 years of showing up and trying and choosing each other, had bought them something priceless: a future, a family, a life worth living. And that, Ethan thought, as Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder and their son slept peacefully and their daughter's laughter filled the air, was worth everything they'd risked to find it.